Senate will come to order. All those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those on the floor will please rise as we're led in prayer by Matt Friend, Senior Pastor of the Bible Center Church in Charleston, West Virginia. Please remain standing after the prayer as the junior senator from the 17th leads us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor.
Let us pray. Oh Lord, our Lord, we praise you. Thank you for being so good to us. Thank you for giving us life, for giving us breath, giving us the health to stand here today in this hallowed hall. Lord, help us to put our final trust not in princes or pastors or senators or presidents, because we as human beings cannot save anyone. We all came into the world the same way, and ashes to ashes and dust to dust will be our end. But now we pray, Lord, that in this moment, while you've given us life, help us to be transformed and to be part of the transformation of our state. Transform our priorities, our goals, our cravings, our unity, our love. Provide for the needs of West Virginians. Send us jobs. Better yet, inspire our good citizens to create jobs. In the next few years, Lord, move us from retreat to prosperity, from pessimism to optimism, from hopelessness to hopefulness. God, I pray especially for my two senators, Senator DeCubo and Senator Nelson. Thank you for them. Lord, help us all to join you in this mission as citizens, as neighbors, as religious leaders and civic leaders. Empower us to take up the calls of the oppressed and the hurting. May West Virginians know that you are good for all generations. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the members, guests, and our staff would join me in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the journal.
West Virginia Legislature Senate Journal, Monday, February 14th, 2022. The Senate met at 11:01 a.m. Senator Blair, Mr. President, in the chair.
The senior senator from the 6th requests unanimous consent that further reading of the journal is dispensed with, and the journal is approved. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Further reading of the journal is dispensed with, and the journal is approved. Introduction of guest. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome our honorary pages for the day. Please stand to be recognized as your name is called. As guest is the senator from Boone, Emily Browning. As guest is the senior senator from the 8th, Samuel Frampton. As guest is the senator from Greenbrier, Connor Human. As guest is the junior senator from the 17th, Sidney Heyer. And as guest is the senior senator from the 6th, Madison Stratton. Will the Senate please make them feel welcome? Further introductions. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few today, but first of all, on behalf of the Senate, it is your honor and mine to introduce our doctor of the day. In the rear of the chamber today with us, we have Dr. Ellen Berry. If you wouldn't mind standing, she's a family medicine physician down at Valley Health. Let Senate give you a warm welcome. Mr. President, I also have online today with us Francine Rada. She's an AARP volunteer who's listening and watching virtually this year. Ms. Rada lives here in Charleston as one of the many AARP West Virginia Redcoats who work to make the voices of those age 15. So she's working for me now, so I appreciate it. And their family's heard all over the state of West Virginia. If the Senate would give her a warm welcome at home. And lastly, Mr. President, we are honored today to have occupational therapists here in the Capitol. In the gallery to my right, we have with us occupational therapy assistants from both the Beckley and University of Charleston campus, as well as those occupational therapists from WVU. Mr. President, these guys do a tremendous service for West Virginia. They encompass so many things: mental health, pediatrics, geriatrics, school-based learning, so from beginning to end, dealing with things, getting people back to their normal life when they've had strokes or spinal cord traumas, behavioral issues, growth and development issues, and so many more. If they wouldn't mind standing, let the Senate give you a warm thank you.
Further introductions. Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we have with us seated in the President's Gallery the chaperone for our honorary page from Spring Valley High School, Madison Stratton's mother, Amy Stratton. Amy, if you will stand and Senate make her welcome.
Senator from Boone.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senator from Logan, we're very pleased to have seated with us in the President's Gallery, the chaperone for our honorary page from Scott High School, Emily, Natalie Browning. If she would stand, the Senate make her welcome.
Junior Senator from the 17th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Our honorary page, Sydney Heyer today from John Adams, is chaperoned by our mother, Angie Heyer. And on behalf of myself and the senior senator from the 17th, if she would stand in the President's Gallery and the members, please make her welcome. Thank you.
Further introductions. Senior Senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On your behalf and my junior senator from the 8th's behalf, we have today seated with us in the President's Gallery the chaperone of our honorary pages. If Jamie Frampton would stand, the Senate please make her welcome.
Are there further introductions? Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we have with us seated in your gallery the chaperone for our honorary page from Greenbrier East, Connor's mom, Amy Human, and his grandma, Paula. If the Senate would please make them feel welcome. And also, Mr. President, on behalf of the Senator from Summers, I'd like to introduce we have several students and faculty today here from Monroe County. I'd like to introduce Angela Parker from Peterstown Middle, Scott Womack, and the students. Will you all please stand and the Senate make you feel welcome?
Further introductions? No further introductions? Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of committee substitute for House Bill 2257 relating to extended supervision for certain drug offenders.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The House adopted House Concurrent Resolution 15 naming the Thomas Brothers Memorial Bridge.
Message will be received and the resolution will be referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
House Concurrent Resolution 58 designating February 14th as National Donor Day.
Message will be received and the resolution will be referred to the Committee on Rules.
House Concurrent Resolution 59 naming the Warrant Officer James G. Bosley Memorial Bridge.
Message will be received and the resolution will be referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
House Concurrent Resolution 60 naming the Fire Chief Lee Thomas Bridge.
Message will be received and the resolution will be referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Communications from the Executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration committee substitute for Senate Bill 247 relating to certified community behavioral health clinics and reports back committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the committee substitute for committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Eric J. Tarr, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration Senate Bill 268, creating exemption from compulsory school attendance for a child who participates in Learning Pod or Micro School, and reports back committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Patricia Partes Rucker, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration committee substitute for Senate Bill 543, creating unemployment compensation insurance fraud unit within Workforce West Virginia, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Eric J. Tarr, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration Senate Bill 584 relating to critical needs and failing systems subaccount and reports back a committee substitute for same with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Eric J. Tarr, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration engrossed House Bill 4048, West Virginia Keep, Bear, and Drive with Arms Act, and has amended same and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 4114, authorizing certain agencies of the Department of Administration to promulgate legislative rules, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration engrossed House Bill 4299 to prohibit the intentional interference with election processes and creating associated criminal penalties, and has amended same and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received. Reports from standing committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill 635 through Senate Bill 646 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system.
Senior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bill 635 through Senate Bill 646 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Joint Resolution 9 by Senators Smith, Clements, Grady, Carnes, Martin, Phillips, Seipolt, and Weld, Disabled Veterans Exemption from Ad Valorem Property Taxation Amendment.
The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary and then the Committee on Finance.
Senate Resolution 28 by Senator Takubo designating February 4th, 2022 as West Virginia Rural Health Workforce Day at the Legislature.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Resolution 29 by Senators Jeffries and Lindsay designating February 16th, 2022 as West Virginia State University Day.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day. Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 45 naming the U.S. Army Corporal John D. Doyle Sr. Memorial Road.
The resolution will be referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 46 supporting North Central West Virginia aviation and aerospace industries.
Senator from Harrison.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 46 supporting North Central West Virginia's aviation and aerospace industries as critical to the economy and further economic development of the state of West Virginia.
The question is on adoption of the resolution. Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to, first of all, commend you for preparation of this resolution. I've stood here many times, always with everybody's help in this chamber, in promoting the aerospace industry that serves all of North Central West Virginia. Where else will you find names like Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Boeing, Aurora, Pratt Whitney, EASW, and many others who call North Central West Virginia their home? All are in the midst of expansions, over 2,000 jobs employing West Virginians from 22 counties are currently at work in our area up there with 1,000 jobs. Now let's say that all together, 1,000 jobs on the horizon. What we need are educated citizens who want to go to work there for lifetime jobs, not minimum wage jobs, not even double minimum wage jobs, but lifetime jobs, good paying jobs that allow them to provide a better life for themselves and their families and that allow their children to do even better. This is the new industry of the future. This is an industry that doesn't require miles and miles of flat land. It fits in the footprint of West Virginia, Mr. President, and this resolution honors all of those who helped make that happen. From the president of Mitsubishi, Hiro Yamamoto, all the way down to our regional general manager, Anthony Hinton, they are bringing jobs to West Virginia that help our children to graduate with an 8-week course in some cases, and they graduate on a Friday and 100% of them go to work on a Monday. Where else does that happen? And we've invested a few $1 million in clearing some land and making available to these companies the room that they need for expansion, that they want to do, that they're investing their money in to make happen. Mr. President, again, I thank you for this resolution. It was your idea. I thank the body for everything they've done in my 2 terms here to make aerospace become a reality for the entire northern part and north central part of West Virginia. For all the employees, I urge a yes vote, Mr. President.
Roll call's been demanded. The demand sustained. The demand is sustained. All those in favor of this resolution will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in affirmative, I declare this resolution adopted. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Senate Resolution 26, designating month of February 2022 as Self-Care Awareness Month.
Senator from Mason.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be put up on its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 26, designating month of February 2022 as Self-Care Awareness Month.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. Self-care is important in everybody's life, so why is it important? It can be summed up in a manner of ways, but I sum them up in these things: taking care of your physical health and body, taking care of your mind and thoughts, your emotional health, your spiritual health, and increasing your own well-being through self-care behaviors. Mind, body, and soul. These are the 3 things that self-care is about, and I encourage members of this body and everybody listening to take care of yourself and to promote self-care awareness. Thank you so much.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted.
Senate Resolution 27, recognizing West Virginia Kids Cancer Crusaders on International Childhood Cancer Awareness Day.
Senior Senator from the 8th.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, the committee reference to be dispensed with, and that the resolution be put upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 27, recognizing the West Virginia Kids Cancer Crusaders on International Childhood Cancer Awareness Day for their dedication and commitment to fighting childhood cancer.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, every year we do a resolution for Kids Cancer Crusaders. And I like to go back and just think about the day that I met them, and that was in 2017, my first term here at the legislature. We have a guest with us here today. Her name is Kelly Weimer. It was a wonderful and beautiful day that day, and I'll never forget about when Sandy Westfall, I was walking in and she grabbed a hold of me and pulled me. She said, "I got some people I want you to meet." And I got to meet Kelly and all the kids that were here. It was a special day. You know, a lot of these kids who are fighting they're fighting for life and fighting against childhood cancer. But it was on that special day that there was one child that I got to meet, and her name was Ellie Washington. They called her the Fighting Bean. Ellie, she lost her battle with cancer December the 26th last year. Ellie and her family, they were always so kind to me. And I always will remember Ellie's sweet smile that she had. You know, I think about that, and I think about these kids that are battling just to be able to see their next birthday. She deserved a healthy childhood. She deserved to learn how to drive, to graduate, have a career, a family of her own one day. But that didn't happen. Mr. President, each day in the United States, 43 children are diagnosed with cancer. The sad part about it is 1 in 5. 1 in 5 will not survive. Mr. President, we desperately need funding for research into these causes. Age-appropriate treatments for childhood cancer. Mr. President, we need it from the federal level. I will say that in 2016, President Obama, he announced a cancer moonshot to accelerate the fight against cancer. 2019, President Trump pledged over $500 million towards cancer research for the next 10 years. And then this year, on February the 2nd, President Biden announced a renewed commitment to the cancer moonshot, including several grants for childhood cancer research. Mr. President, this is nothing more bipartisan support for our children with cancer and their families. Thanks to each of you for your support. Mr. President, I urge passage of the resolution. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Logan? No, Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the comments made by the senior senator from the 8th be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Further discussion. Was roll call demanded? Is roll calls demanded? Is demand sustained? The demand is sustained. All those in favor of this resolution will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results on this question. 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare this resolution adopted. Bills on third reading. Well, Senator from Marion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just ask unanimous consent that the remarks in regard to SCR 46 by my friend from Harrison and the remarks on SR 26 from the senator from Mason be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 33, protecting consumers against businesses using automatic renewals without consent. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 33 would create a new article in our state code, and it would be designated as Article 6.0, and it goes in Chapter 46A, which is General Consumer Protection. The new article would have a total of 6 new sections in it. First section is an expression of legislative intent. Second section are definitions of terms that are used in the article. Terms defined include automatic renewal offer terms, etc., consumer, continuous service. Section 3 addresses automatic renewals or continuous service offers, and it sets forth prohibited activities. and it provides for notice of material changes in terms of a contract. Section 4 of the Act provides that goods that are sent to a consumer without consent are treated as and deemed in the law to be unconditional gifts. So, a company that sends you something in the mail that's unsolicited cannot make you pay for it. The law says that's going to be an unconditional gift. Section 5 permits civil actions under the Act, and Section 6 delineates the exemptions under the Act. We're incorporating in this the cure, right to cure notice provisions that we've added into other places in the Consumer Credit Protection Act, and I think also in the Wage Payment Collection Act. The whole idea behind this bill, Mr. President, basically is that before you get automatically renewed or subscribed for a renewal term on something to which you've previously subscribed, the company or service which has issued your subscription, which you paid, has to give you some advance notice. And if it's the renewal periods are a year at a time, they got to notify you in advance of the renewal, 30 days in advance, to say, hey, you have a right not to renew this. You don't have to renew it. You can cancel it, but they have to give you that notice before, they're going to ping your credit card again or debit your PayPal account or in some other fashion. This is very similar to bills that we passed out of the Senate a couple, 3 years in a row now, I believe, that have never reached the finish line. But I'll be happy to try to answer questions about this legislation, but otherwise I urge its passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine to ascertain the results on this question. 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 330, authorizing DOT to promulgate legislative rules. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 330 is our rules bundle number 8, and it's transportation rules. It contains 4 rules. Rules are from the Division of Motor Vehicles relating to examination and issuance of driver's licenses, Division of Motor Vehicles relating to dealer licensing, Division of Motor Vehicles relating to the collection of tax on the sale of a vehicle, and the Department of Transportation regarding employment procedures. 4 rules, Mr. President, in this bundle. I'd be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine to ascertain the results on this question. 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
The Senior Senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used in the passage of the bill be the roll call used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 531, increasing annual salaries of certain state employees. Third reading of the bill. The bill is advanced to third reading with the right to amend.
I forget. Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Baldwin moved to amend the bill on page 26, section 8A.
Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd ask unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I'm going to begin this differently than normal. I'm going to tell you what this doesn't do because I started to offer an amendment wanting to do one thing. I wanted to offer an amendment which ensured that if somebody had a full-time government job, they didn't also have to rely, or they didn't qualify or rely on government benefits as well. And thanks to the good work of the staff, I found out how complicated that is. It's not easy to find out. If you're a state worker, you're working a full-time job, what sort of government benefits you might qualify for and how that would affect you, if your salary changes. So I want to thank the staff for the good work. What we found is, if you're on SNAP, it's one level. If you're on CHIP, it's another level in terms of how you compare to the federal poverty standard. And so I didn't want to offer something that would actually end up hurting people in the long run, because if you don't get the numbers right, it could end up hurting people in the long run. So now to what this actually is, since I couldn't do that, I think we need a study to look at this. The point of these pay raises is to try to fill vacancies. The point of these pay raises is to try and reward, recruit, and retain employees. And I think part of that is ensuring that if you're working a full-time job, you don't have to rely on government assistance. So I'd like to ask in this amendment that we study this issue in detail. It is complicated, and I think it deserves that sort of attention. So I appreciate the time, and I would urge adoption of the study amendment.
Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I might not disagree with some of the statements that was made in there, this is the wrong bill to be doing that in. I don't believe that the amendment is germane to this bill. There's no mention in the title of this bill of authorizing any such study. So I'll request a ruling from the chair on the germaneness.
Senior Senator from the 4th, it's opinion of the chair that the amendment is not germane. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Lindsay moved to amend the bill on page 6, section 5, after line 126.
Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, what my amendment does is it increases salary across the board for the state police, the teachers, and service personnel by 3% under certain circumstances and conditions, and those are this, that if the combined balance of funds in the Revenue Fund Shortfall Reserve Fund and the Revenue Fund Shortfall Reserve Fund Part B exceeds $1 billion, then $50 million shall be transferred from those funds to the general revenue to pay for this 3% salary increase. And what it means to the teachers and service personnel should this body adopt the amendment and it become law. Once those conditions are met, a 3% increase to both the service personnel and teachers equals to $41,475,283.20. And for the state police, a 3% increase of $1,341,796.20. We believe this is reasonable. We believe this takes the politics out of pay raises for teachers, service personnel, and state troopers. We believe this will lead to greater retention and rehiring of those professions. As the body knows, we have numerous vacancies throughout our teachers, service personnel, and state police. And this, of course, is on top of the 5% increase that this bill calls for. I'm willing to take questions, and I reserve the right to close. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you. Would the junior senator from the 8th yield?
Senator yields. Senator yields.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Can you tell me who you discussed the potential impact on bond ratings with the state with your amendment?
I did not discuss the potential bond ramifications of this amendment, although I'm under the impression and belief that the funds that we're talking about, the rainy day fund, we can maintain our bond rating at levels of $1 billion or more, unless you have information otherwise.
Have you been in discussions where bond rating has been discussed relative to how you regulate money that comes out of the rainy day funds?
No.
Okay. Thank you. I'll speak to the amendment whenever.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This would have potentially catastrophic effects on bond rating by treating our rainy day fund like a checking account, which is what this amendment does. So for that reason alone, that's enough to oppose this amendment. The other thing is that this amendment has in language in there, it says that not only is it going to treat it like a checking account, it's going to do it every year thereafter. And every year thereafter, that says in Section F of this, it's going to bind future legislators to treat, I almost said create, to treat our rainy day fund like a checking account. And that's a pretty dangerous amendment. I would urge its rejection.
Is there further discussion? If not, Junior Senator from the 8th to close debate.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. To address the concern raised by the senator from the 4th, the finance chair, just to remind everyone, our bond rating at the present moment is great, and we're at $1 billion plus, I believe. What this amendment seeks to do is to keep that rating, keep that level, and only trigger these salary increases when, in fact, the bond rating is good for the general revenue and rainy day fund. Again, what I'm trying to do is two things, or what we're trying to do is two things. One, we're trying to increase the wages for folks that we need, that we all rely upon. They deserve this type of raise. I don't think there's any question in that regard. I think everyone can agree that increases in raises leads to higher retention, rehiring, especially when we have vacancies across the state for the state police, our teachers and service personnel. And two, it takes the politics out of this particular situation so that these people's salaries, their livelihood, their futures doesn't become a political football to be punted between parties. This is a good, reasonable amendment. Again, it's good policy. I've not seen or heard any specific information other than the testimony on the floor that I just became aware of, any specific site that the bond rating would be hurt. At $1 billion, it's good right now. This is good policy. I urge adoption. Thank you.
Question for the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the junior senator from the 8th. Roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? Demand is sustained. All those in favor of the gentleman's amendment from the 8th will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 10 yeas, 23 nays, 1 absent and not voting. Less than a majority. I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Question now is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 531 provides for an average 5% salary increase of 4 classifications of state workers: state police, professional educators, professional student support personnel, and school service personnel. Salaries for the state police would be raised by $2,550 at a cost of $2,236,327. Salaries for professional educators would be raised $2,240 at a cost of $49,341,893. $49,341,893. Salaries for professional student support personnel would be raised $2,240 at a cost of $3,382,772, and salaries for service personnel would be raised $122 at a month. Salaries for service personnel would be raised $122 a month at a cost of $16,400,807, for a total cost to the state of $71,361,799. These costs have all been included in the governor's proposed fiscal year 2023 budget. And Mr. President, I'm very happy that we can offer this bill forward because these employees certainly are deserving of this raise. We very much appreciate what they do and look forward to the future as we continue to prosper here in West Virginia to be able to do more and more to make our salaries more competitive in state government with private sector. I urge adoption, passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Oregon.
If the senator from the 4th would yield, just a question.
The senator yields.
To the distinguished finance chair, you said that it's built into the budget. So am I correct to assume that it's contemplated that these become effective as of July 1st, or is there another date on which these pay raises would take effect?
They become effective on July 1st.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Senator from Harrison.
President, will the gentleman from the 4th continue to yield?
Will the senator yield? Senator yields.
Senator, this covers service personnel, teachers, and state police, correct?
And professional student support personnel.
I'm sorry, professional what?
And professional student support personnel.
Okay. We have a whole bunch of other employees. Are we going to have a bill for any increase for them?
This is the only bill I'm aware of right now for state employees.
I mean, and I appreciate, listen, any increase to our workers' salaries is I think a good increase, but is there, I mean, and this was touted to be something to help with inflation and some of the other increased costs they're facing. We have a whole bunch of other employees. Is there anything that we're going to do for them?
These are the only employees that actually require legislation. The other ones are contemplated already in the governor's budget that do not require legislation.
Right, they're in the budgets, but if we increase the budgets to allow those kind of increases by the various agencies?
Yeah, it's already in the budget to do that.
So they're going to get these increases also?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
Further discussion. Senator from Mason.
Mr. President, I request a ruling from the chair as to whether I should vote on this issue, considering that I am a public educator in the state of West Virginia.
In the opinion of the chair, you're a member of class and you'll be required to vote. Are there others?
Thank you, sir.
That wish to rule 43? Okay. Is there further discussion? Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the Senator from Marshall. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine to ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective July 1, 2022. Request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective July the 1st, 2022, and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective July the 1st, 2022. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 532, requiring reports to Joint Committee on Pensions and Retirement every 5 years on deferred retirement option plans. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This Senate Bill 532 comes to us at the request of the Municipal Pension Oversight Board. The bill amends Chapter 8, Article 22, Section 25, as it relates to required actuarial reports that are prepared and presented to the Legislature's Joint Committee on Pensions and Retirement regarding active deferred retirement option plans, which are also known as DROPs. And for the benefit of the members, a DROP is a pension plan that allows members to continue to work beyond their retirement date while converting part of their retirement benefit into a lump sum plan. This bill would require that, currently DROPs are reviewed annually by an actuarial contracted by the municipal board. This bill would require that instead of annually, it would be every 5 years that the Oversight Board has the actuarial report done for the Joint Committee. According to the municipal board, moving to a 5-year plan instead of the 1 year will result in total savings of over $50,000 each cycle. These savings ultimately are reallocated back to each of those pension plans. Mr. President, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those voting present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed House Bill 4097 to prohibit non-public funding sources for election administration and related expenses without prior written approval by the State Election Commission. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 4097 would create a single new section of our state code, and it goes in the elections chapter in Article 1A, which covers the Secretary of State and the State Elections Commission, and the new section would be designated as Section 9. The whole bill at this point is the strike and insert amendment that the Senate adopted yesterday, and I discussed it and described it yesterday in toto. I'll just do a brief recap. This bill is designed to do is to put some controls and regulations on the circumstance that occurred a couple places around the country in the last election cycle, or perhaps 2 cycles, where outside people or interests or companies were providing gifts or donations, money, to the people that run and administer the election. So this bill first creates a complete, full prohibition. It says no county commission, no county clerk, no municipal governing body, or other public official or body that's responsible for overseeing or regulating or administering an election held within West Virginia may directly receive any or accept any gift, grant, contribution, or donation of money or anything of value for election administration and related expenses from any private individual, corporation, partnership, trust, or third party, and all such gifts, grants, contributions, or donations may only be accepted, received, expended, or distributed by the West Virginia Secretary of State pursuant to the requirements of this section. So the law also allows for rulemaking by the West Virginia Secretary of State. The bill will say the Secretary of State can't accept any such gift or donation or money from any person without the approval of the State Elections Commission. And then, if something like that were to occur, the bill provides that it's the Secretary of State, pursuant to approval of the State Election Commission, that would make distributions of such to among the counties or municipalities, that sort of thing. It's to make sure, the bill is intended to make sure that the operation and the conduction of elections in our state, public elections, are not tainted by outside money that's infused by someone who may have an interest in affecting the outcome of the election, Mr. President. And I'd be happy to try to answer questions. I urge the passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk should prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk has the title amendment.
Senator Trump moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed House Bill 4312, extending the option of electronic absentee ballot transmission to first responders in certain emergency circumstances. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 4312 would amend and reenact 2 sections of our state code, current law, and they're both in the elections chapter 3. Article 3 is absentee voting, and it's sections 1 and 5 of that article would be amended and reenacted. This bill, like the one we just considered, I should have said when we were considering that, is an initiative from our West Virginia Secretary of State. The purpose of this bill is to allow emergency first responders who have to be away, get called away sometimes abruptly from their home or the area where they normally vote, traditionally vote, to vote by absentee on the using the electronic absentee system that the Secretary of State utilized in the last election cycle, authorized by this legislature. Last cycle, I think the use was limited to our servicemen and women and other citizens of West Virginia who were overseas, out of the country. I think that was the scope of it in the last election. This would expand that a little bit and say if you're an emergency responder, and that's a defined term. That's actually, the term used in the bill is qualified first responder. And that is a person with specialized training who arrives and provides aid at the scene of an emergency, such as an accident, natural disaster, an act of terrorism. First responders typically include emergency medical technicians, firefighters, law enforcement officers, neighborhood assistance officers, and paramedics. And the Secretary of State, it's not an exclusive list. The Secretary of State made a point to tell the Judiciary Committee when we were considering it that that's not intended to be an exclusive list, that, for instance, somebody who worked as a lineman for a power company who got called away to another state because of a storm or a tornado that knocked down power lines right before the election would fit within that definition of first responder. But it's to make sure that those people, Mr. President, don't lose their right to vote, don't lose their franchise. They'll have, even if it comes up in very short order before the election, they'll still have an opportunity to vote. Be happy to try and answer questions. I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk should prepare the Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine, ascertain the results on this question. 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting. More than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk has the title amendment.
Committee on the Judiciary move to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 86, creating criminal offense of sexual extortion. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 146, relating to interpretations of school laws. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 415, capping severance tax collections and general revenue at specified percentage. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 442, relating to West Virginia Public Employee Retirement System. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 443, including police and firefighter as electors of trustees for certain pension funds. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 524, placing duties and functions of certain boards and commissions under Department of Arts, Culture, and History. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 542, transferring Broadband Enhancement Council from Department of Commerce to Department of Economic Development. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 570, establishing training for law enforcement in handling individuals with Alzheimer's and dementias. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 574, relating to West Virginia PEIA. Second reading of the bill.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
President, I request unanimous consent for the bill to move to third with right to amend.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Senate Bill 591, relating to process for filling vacancies in state legislature. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Bills will be advanced. Introduction of guest. Remarks by members. Senator from Randolph.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday I stood up and talked about House Bill 4007 and how important I believe that is, that we get it here on the floor and get it down to the governor's desk and all, because I think this is one of the most transformational things we can do, starting that reduction and elimination of our state income tax. But that's actually not totally why I stood up today. The reason I stood up today is because shortly after I made those remarks, somebody else popped up and they spouted off correlation doesn't equal causation. And every time I hear that, it's always done by somebody who's sort of like a jack-in-the-box. They pop up and they put that out there and they sit back down and, man, they're proud. They just said one of the most profound things they could imagine mankind ever saying. And I wanted to explore that just a little bit. It kind of reminds me, as a father of 8, the level of pride you see there about what they've done is like a 2-month-old who's just filled a diaper. They get very proud too, and for all the same reasons, I think. But in this particular case, I want to explore this idea because so often I hear that said about correlation and causation, and I think that what gets missed there is the idea, the understanding, the scientific thought that goes in behind why people do make the mistake of correlation and causation, and that is because science starts with correlation. You start by looking and seeing a correlation, and then the curious mind wonders if maybe there's not a cause behind it. And so you explore it a little bit more. Now, for me personally, on this particular issue, I listed off 9 states that don't have an income tax and how their economies outperform and so on. Well, I've lived in half of those states, and I've done business in every single one of them. And so for me, when I saw the correlation, I didn't sit back down knowing that correlation doesn't equal causation. I got curious, like, is there a reason why this is always true for these states, or is there an alternative reason? Lots of times we hear people say, well, West Virginia isn't Florida. We don't have beaches in West Virginia. But then I answer that question by saying, well, Nevada doesn't have beaches. South Dakota doesn't have beaches. Wyoming doesn't have beaches. So maybe beaches are not the answer. And they say, you don't have the flat terrain of, a Texas or whatever like that. And then I look around and I go, but New Hampshire doesn't have flat terrain either. It's a mountainous state. It's got harsh winters, much like West Virginia, and yet they perform very well. So what you do whenever you see a correlation is you form a hypothesis, and then you test that hypothesis against known data, and then you can arrive at a conclusion. In 1901, there was a fellow that went out to Colorado Springs, Colorado, as a dentist, and he noticed that everybody there that was born and raised in that area had brown teeth. And he thought, well, that's interesting, maybe there's something that's causing this. Maybe there's a causation of this brown teeth. And so he started exploring, but one of the other things he discovered is that they didn't have cavities. People that lived in that area didn't have cavities. So he began to wonder, wow, that's a very interesting thing, obviously, because cavities are a big deal. And he studied that issue, and he even went to Arkansas later on because there was a similar phenomenon in Arkansas. And eventually what they discovered was that these places had fluoride in the water. You see, he saw a correlation, and instead of being intellectually lazy and sitting back down, proud as punch, he explored that correlation, and he tried to find out what was happening there. And today, almost every major city in the United States has a fluoridated water system that helps protect our children from cavities because a guy in Colorado, a dentist in Colorado, decided to see if maybe there was some causation behind the correlation. When we see people talking about giving their kids, calcium-rich diet, we don't do that for no reason. We do it because somebody observed somewhere along the way that a calcium-rich diet created strong bones. But it wasn't just the calcium. You also have to have the vitamin D, and you also have to have citric acid, and you also have to have outdoor exercise because the exercise also helps to strengthen the bones. We study things. We look for correlations so that we can establish causations. It doesn't always work out that way. I believe as the members of this body that were here in 2017 might recall, when we were working on tax reform, I had a stack of papers on my desk that was about 1.5 feet high. You see, I didn't just assume because there was a correlation that there was causation. I went and looked at studies all over the world. We're talking about from Harvard and MIT and Stanford and the University of Chicago, the London School of Economics, as one particular senator may recall. It wasn't just that there was a correlation. There was an enormous amount of science was then conducted based on that correlation, and most of that science came back and said, income tax hurts your economy, reducing it and eliminating it helps your economy. At a certain point, when that diaper is full with that 2-year-old, a responsible party has to show up and clean up the mess. And I can tell you from experience, sometimes it's touch and go, whether the mess will be cleaned up before you run out of wipes. In my case, it's not always the case that I ran out of wipes sometimes before the mess was cleaned up. But that's what we're here to do. We inherited an economy that was a mess in West Virginia in 2015, and we're cleaning that mess up, and maybe we'll run out of wipes before we get the mess cleaned up. But this idea that you can't look at a correlation and assume that there might be something there enough to investigate it, the idea that you just pop up and spout that off, if you have an alternative theory, if you can show some real science that says that there is no causation behind it, I'd be happy to hear it. But I've never seen any counter-arguments related to the income tax. Clearly, this has a massive effect on economic growth. We see it across the United States in states that have never implemented or have reversed their income tax. And so, Mr. President, I just wanted to point out that sometimes correlation does equal causation, and we have important work to do here, and I think we should put a little bit more thought behind what we're doing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further remarks, Senator from Brooke. Senator from Cabell. Senator from Brooke,
Thank you,
since you have the floor.
I seek unanimous consent that the remarks of the Senator from Randolph be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. No correlation and causation here. I think a lot of us probably remember back in 2012 during a presidential debate between then President Obama and candidate Mitt Romney. And then candidate Mitt Romney said that the biggest threat to foreign policy threat to the United States of America was Russia. And in response to that, President Obama said, Mitt, the 80s called, and they want their foreign policy back. Well, Mr. President, currently one of the top-rated shows on Netflix is Cobra Kai. A new Ghostbusters movie recently came out, and the Russian bear is once threatening global security, and so I guess we have now gone back to the future. Currently, I think a lot of us probably have seen in the news that there are 100,000 troops, Russian troops, circling the eastern and southern portion of Ukraine. And there's another 30,000 Russian troops in Belarus, currently conducting an exercise there that's soon to end. And there has been a lot of talk of war, of the Russians starting a war that they claim is necessary for their security, but in reality, Mr. President, is just another crisis invented and caused by Vladimir Putin. Back in 2008, I was a young first lieutenant working the watch desk at Ramstein Air Force Base. It was a quiet Sunday morning, and all of a sudden, things went pretty quickly to a very quickly deteriorating situation when the Russians invaded the small nation of Georgia. They put everything they had in the air and a lot of troops on the ground and started moving. I spent the next probably 36 hours at work briefing command staff and working to deconflict airspace so that we could fly Georgian troops that were in Iraq back to their country. In 2014, Mr. President, the Russians then annexed the Crimean region of the Ukraine. The world had no response. The United States had no response to that aggression, which they said they needed to undertake for Russian citizens in that part of Ukraine. And so that brings us to the current problem that we're at, where we have evacuated embassy staff. We've moved our embassy to the western part of the country. The United Kingdom has told its citizens that they need to evacuate and has also evacuated most of their embassy staff. So you're probably wondering why discuss this today? Why discuss the global events in another part of the world here on the Senate floor? And I'll tell you why. A lot of us come from communities, or represent communities, where there's a heavy immigrant population. I represent the Northern Panhandle. Wheeling had a strong German population. The city of Weirton had a strong Greek, Serbian population. They came and worked in the steel mill there. Wellsburg, where I live, has a very long history with Italian immigrants. A lot of my family has come from Italy. My stepfather's family. A lot of people in my town are descendants of those who came here from Italy. I myself am German-Irish, so I finally figured out when I was about 12 why a lot of people called me Tom Hagen when I was growing up in Wellsburg. And so all of those communities over the years have kind of seen, like the country as a whole, a dwindling of the amount of immigrants that come to the United States that came here for the American dream. That those who have been seeking to come here has slowed down. However, recently in Weirton, we had a young family from Ukraine that came here to see if they could find their part of the American dream. And I'm very, very fortunate that myself, my wife, have become very close friends with Vasil and Natalia, their young daughter, Violetta, who was 5 when she came here, didn't speak any English, and now she has to translate sometimes for her parents. And their young daughter, Michaela, who is an American citizen by virtue of being born here last year. In the past 5 years that he's been here, he's worked extremely hard, has started his own business. If it's broke, he can fix it. He does maintenance and home repair and does amazing work. And everybody in the city of Weirton knows how much of a hard worker he is. and how much talent he has. In the city, it's been very impressive to see the city, a city of once full of immigrants, embrace a family of immigrants that have come here seeking the American dream. And that, I think, Mr. President, is what makes West Virginia special. And that's why I bring this all up. That's what makes West Virginia special, is that a state and a nation that was once full of immigrants is, that number has dwindled, but as those seeking a better life have escaped a country that has been torn by warfare, by Russia, they've come here and been accepted and embraced as part of our community. And I think that is what makes West Virginia special, is that by living here, they've been able to seek not only the American dream, but also the West Virginian dream. And that's the dream that we all in here, all 34 of us, want to pursue. And we want to make sure that the West Virginia dream is something that we make happen every day here, that we work towards that goal of making the American dream able to be happening right here at home. And so I'm very proud to call those people friends. I'm very proud of the life that they have been able to make here, but even more so, I'm very proud of our state and my community and how they've welcomed them and embraced them. And so I appreciate everybody's indulgence here for a couple minutes, and thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Upshur.
President, today I want to talk about a couple topics. One's really close to my heart, and I hope I can get through this. It was reported in today's news that 500,000 Americans are expected to die of overdoses from present day till 2029. And they're going to die unless we intervene. Interventions are imposed which could reduce the death numbers by as much as 40%. It's going to take intervention in our schools at an early age. It's going to take revenue to do this. Rehabilitation, not in our largest cities in West Virginia, but rehabilitation possibly on a county basis. And when you do this, all drug and alcohol abusers will not take advantage of any programs, because in their minds, no problem exists. I've got a handle on this. How well I know. But we have another problem today that has overshadowed our overdose deaths, and that is COVID. Yesterday marked another milestone in West Virginia. Unfortunately, we surpassed 6,000 deaths in the Mountain State. We reached 1,000 COVID deaths on December 15, 2020. And in the 13 and a half months, we've added 5,023, and it's climbing. Now, I'm not giving a speech about mandating masks or vaccines. When the Senate clerk called me the end of December and said, you can either go to Morgantown or go to Charleston and get your vaccination if you want it, I said, I'll be the first in line. I'll go to Morgantown. But that's not what I want to talk about. I'm acutely aware of this because I have family members and friends who are dealing with COVID and addiction, and it's the toughest problems they've ever faced, that they've ever tangled with. Today is an important day in my life, because on this day, some 50 years ago, my son Sean came into the world at 10:35. And the first time I met him, I knew I liked this guy. In fact, I loved him. And contrary to what other people told me, when I spoke to him for the first time, he looked up at me and smiled. And everybody said, it wasn't a smile, it was gas. No, it was a smile, I'm telling you. But I soon learned that parenting is a full-time job. And one of my toughest jobs I've ever faced in my life. And parenting does not stop when your children leave home. On June 3rd, 2020, my son became one of the 1,600 drug overdoses that were reported from April 2020 to April 2021. And when the trooper called my home, and I knew this trooper, and I won't repeat his name, but he asked a question. He said, "Are you the father of David Hamilton?" I said, "I'm the father of David Sean Hamilton. What's he done this time?" And there was a long 3-second pause, and it must have lasted 20 minutes because he finally came on and said, "Look, we found your son dead this morning." Now, we're sitting right now on revenue surpluses. It's the most we've ever had in this history of our state. And it's been reported that next year they're going to be close maybe to $1 billion surpluses. We've got to start talking about this drug abuse and substance abuse, whatever you want to call it. And we got to start putting the revenue where it's going to work. Law enforcement doing a yeoman's job, but they can't do it all. And I'm a firm believer that rehabilitation, although Sean would not go, he said, "Well, I did my rehab when I was in," he was in prison 2 years. "I did my rehab in prison." But when he came out, he got back in with the same friends and the same activity that he had before he was arrested. It's time we put some money towards this problem. Thank you.
Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the remarks by the senator from Upshur be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
And I also ask unanimous consent that the remarks made by the senator from Brooke be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Further remarks? Senator from Boone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ask unanimous consent to return to the 11th order of business.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Boone.
Thank you. On behalf of the senator from Logan, we're very pleased to have a Boone County girl, Scott High School graduate, who is now a lawyer here in Charleston. If Lauren Snyder would stand and Senate make her welcome.
Are there further introductions? Senator from Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the senior senator from 14th, or senator from Preston, we have one of our constituents in the North Gallery there that has come from Taylor County, a good friend of ours, Rodney Goff. If he would stand and the members make him welcome.
Further introductions. Remarks by members. Recognize the senator from Randolph for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I've lost family members to addiction myself, not son, and I pray that that never happens, but I'm sure that there's not a person in this room that hasn't experienced that loss and seen the struggles that they go through. And I would ask the unanimous consent of the Senate that maybe we rise in a moment of silence to recognize the 50th birthday of the senator from Upsher's son. I'm sure he misses him every day, and all the other victims.
Without objection, please rise. Thank you. Further remarks? Miscellaneous business, Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements or subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m., and I have two announcements.
Proceed.
First announcement, your Committee on Rules will meet immediately following the floor session in the Senate's President's Conference Room. Announcement two, the last day to introduce bills is on Monday, February 21st. So if you have a bill you want to introduce, it must be pre-approved into the drafting department by the end of the day on Thursday, the 17th, so this Thursday. Thank you.
Are there further announcements? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance will meet today at 3 p.m. in room 451M.
Further announcements? Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Education will meet today at 2 p.m. in room 451M. The agenda has been posted. As needed, we will reconvene in order to finish our agenda. Thank you.
Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet today at 3 o'clock p.m. in the Judiciary Committee Room 208 West Wing.
Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Government Organization will be meeting today at 2 p.m. in room 208 West. We, too, will meet later, if need be, to complete the agenda.
Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. Committee on Health will meet today at 1 p.m. in the 451M.
Further announcements. Senator from Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Energy will meet today at 1 p.m. in 208 West, and the agenda has been posted.
Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. There will be a meeting of the subcommittee on Senate Bill 500 immediately following the Judiciary Committee in room 208 West. Thank you.
Senator from Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Workforce will meet Wednesday at 10 a.m. in 208 West.
Further announcements? No further announcements? Question for the Senate stand adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate adjourned until 11 a.m. tomorrow.
House will please be in order. Those persons not having privilege of the floor will please vacate the chamber. All members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer today by the lady from the 57th, Delegate Rowan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to start off today by reading from the Good News Bible, Proverbs 31, verse 8. Speak up for people who cannot speak for themselves. Protect the rights of all who are helpless. Speak for them and be a righteous judge. Let us pray. O God, our Heavenly Father, I ask your blessing today on this house, the house of the people. I also ask your blessing on those who depend on us to make the right decisions, decisions that will impact their lives. May the work that we do here today bring you honor and glory. These things I ask in your precious holy name. Amen.
Amen. If all members and guests in the galleries will please remain standing, we'll be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by the gentleman of the 27th, Delegate Smith.
Please join me today in honoring our flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Monday, February 14th, 2022.
Gentleman 27th, Delegate Gearhart.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
The gentleman number 27th, Delegate Gearhart, asks unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? There are no objections. Lady from the 49th for an update on the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Third reading special calendar, committee substitute for House Bill 3122. Committee substitute House Bill 4087. Committee substitute House Bill 4282. And committee substitute for House Bill 4418 were moved to the House calendar. On second reading special calendar, committee substitute for House Bill 4262 and House Bill 4568 were moved to the House calendar. And finally, on first reading special calendar, committee substitute for House Bill 4553 was moved to House calendar.
Introductions. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our doctor of the day is going to be Howard Lafferty from Madison, West Virginia.
Lady in the 57th, Doggett Rowan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have some very, very special pages. They're not paging just for me, they're paging for everyone in this room today. They're the students from the West Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind. Cody Dean, Rochelle Hill, John Holstein, Macy Kuhn, Audrey Mattingly, Jenna Payne, Joycelyn Prater, and Robert Rowan Wolford, my grandson, is also here today. They are joined with members of their staff, Melanie Hesse, Bill Kessler, Tony Brothers, Christy Mills, and actually from the Department of Education we have with us today Stephanie Abraham and Stuart Frazier. And what they're doing right now, they are passing out invitations. Because of COVID restrictions, they couldn't come and sing for us today. So instead, they are giving you an invitation to come to Hampshire County, to the School for the Deaf and Blind, and join us there on April 28th. The cookies that they're bringing around to you actually were made by the ProStart students. So let's give them a wild and wonderful West Virginia welcome.
Gentleman 29th, Douglas Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce a good friend of mine and constituent from Raleigh County, Jonathan Barber, is in the North Gallery today. If the House will make him feel welcome.
Lady in the 32nd, Douglas Kessinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the West Gallery, we are joined by students from University of Charleston's Occupational Therapy, and then also members of the West Virginia Occupational Therapy Association, as well as my good friend Cody Dindler and Mary Hager. If they would stand and the House make them welcome.
Gentleman 7th, Douglas Barnhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. Joining us today for Youth and Government Day from Pleasants County Middle School. In the South Gallery, we have Shane DeWeese, Maddie Steele, Alyssa Dawson, and Sydney Kisner, and they're also joined by their teacher, Shaylin Sandy. And I would just ask that they stand and the House make them feel welcome, please.
Gentleman 28th, Douglas Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North Gallery today, visiting with us from Monroe County, are students from the Mount View Middle School in Union and students from the Peterstown Middle School in Peterstown, and they're in Monroe County. And escorting them is Mrs. Ashley Mann. She has managed to bring more students down here than any sponsoring teacher in the state, and we appreciate her very much. Would those students and Miss Mann please stand and let's all make them welcome. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman 19th, Douglas Booth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the South Gallery, we have a constituent from Wayne County, Jeff Rowe. Would you please stand and the House make him feel welcome.
Gentleman 32nd, Douglas Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am so happy to be joined today by students from Fayette County, Fayette Youth Leadership, students from Meadowbridge and Fayetteville. If they would stand as I read their names, I would appreciate it. Ava Pomeroy, Sophia Allen, Lillian Hayes, Tucker Pugh, Jordan Butcher, Ava Emery, Natalie Rice, joined by their teachers, Elizabeth Hamlin and Tamara Banks. Would the House please make them feel welcome?
Gentleman the 35th, Douglas Scaff, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of my colleagues in the 35th District, Delegate Young, Capito, and Pack, in the West Gallery, we have some students visiting with us today from St. Albans High School, our AP Government and Politics class, escorted by Ms. Hensley and Ms. Bagley. If they would stand and make the House, please make them feel welcome.
Are there further introductions? Okay, if not, report to standing committees.
Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement has had under consideration House Bill 2300, including family court judges in the judges' retirement system, House Bill 4539 to amend retirement information and providing for cleanup, House Bill 4540 to update all retirement plans to comport with federal law, House Bill 4612 decreasing the time period of eligibility for non-duty disability from 10 to 5 or more years of service for municipal police officers and firefighters' retirement, and House Bill 4613 relating to increasing the multiplier for use in determining accrued benefit in the West Virginia Municipal Police Officers and Firefighters Retirement System, and reports the same back with recommendation that they each do pass, but that they first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received. Those bills will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2910 to modify the allowable number of magistrate judges per county. House Bill 4077 provides certain classes of property protections from creditor collections. House Bill 4340 relating to maximizing the opportunity to recover anatomical gifts for the purpose of transplantation, therapy, research, or education. And House Bill 4583 clarifying the definition of incapacity so that incarceration in the penal system or detention outside of the United States may not be inferred as resulting in a lack of capacity to execute a power of attorney, and reports back committee substitutes, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 4314, excludes solicitor from the definition of investment advisor, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Concurrent Resolution 45, Specialist for Dennis Harvey Roberts Bridge, McDowell County, and House Concurrent Resolution 54, Mayor George Caros Bridge, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each be adopted, but that they first be referred to the Committee on Rules.
That report will be received. Those resolutions will be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Bill 4066, Distracted Driving Act, and reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, but that it first be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
That report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Bill 4335, establishing that the Division of Motor Vehicles has jurisdiction to hear certain driver's license suspension cases, and appeals are made in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act, and House Bill 4361 relating to the suspension of driver's licenses for failure to appear in court, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass, but that they first be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
That report will be received and those bills will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Bill 4334 relating to the bond required of licensed services by increasing the bond amount to $100,000, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Bill 4170, authorizing the Division of Motor Vehicles to promulgate a legislative rule relating to dealer licensing. House Bill 4171, authorizing the Division of Motor Vehicles to promulgate a legislative rule relating to collection of tax on the sale of a vehicle. House Bill 4172, authorizing the Department of Transportation to promulgate a legislative rule relating to employment procedures. House Bill 4343, relating to renewal of registrations by sheriffs by establishing that registration renewal is discretionary. House Bill 4345, relating to motor vehicle registration cards by establishing electronic or mobile registration cards. And House Bill 4563, provide for a license plate for auto mechanics, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass, but that they first be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
That report will be received. Those bills will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration House Bill 4169, authorizing the Division of Motor Vehicles to promulgate a legislative rule relating to examination and issuance of driver's license, and reports the same back with amendment, with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
That report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration House Bill 4141, authorizing the Governor's Committee on Crime, Delinquency, and Correction to promulgate a legislative rule relating to law enforcement training and certification standards. House Bill 4242, authorizing the Division of Labor to promulgate a legislative rule relating to child labor. And House Bill 4406, to establish the West Virginia Military Hall of Fame, and reports committee substitutes back therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on Education has had under consideration House Bill 4556, video and audio recordings in self-contained classrooms, and reports the same back with amendment, with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration House Bill 4430, relating to definitions of base salary and overtime for police and firemen pensions, and reports back a committee substitute therefore, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration House Bill 4433, providing that retirement benefits are not subject to execution, and reports the same back with a title amendment, with the recommendation that it do pass as amended.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration House Bill 4338, reducing annual permit fee for each video lottery terminal owned or leased by a limited video lottery licensee. House Bill 4462, relating to deferred retirement option plan evaluations, and committee substitute for Senate Bill 445, modifying police and firemen's pension plans for trustees, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass.
That report will be received.
Your Committee on Pensions and Retirement has had under consideration House Bill 4614, providing optional retirement service credit for unused accrued annual or sick leave days for municipal police and firefighters, and reports the same back with amendment, with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance. Are there further standing committee reports?
Your Committee on Rules has had under consideration House Concurrent Resolution 1, naming a locally known bridge in Ashford, West Virginia as the Alex Purdue Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 4, John B. Short Memorial Bridge, Logan County. House Concurrent Resolution 7, to name a locally known bridge in Seth, West Virginia as the Colton Red Haney Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 9, naming the James C. Vickers Silver Star Highway. House Concurrent Resolution 13, Dr. Enrique and Mrs. Sally Aguilar Memorial Bridge, Sally H. Aguilar Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 14, to create the Colonel Ronald John Ron Chiquetto Memorial Road.
House Concurrent Resolution 25 to name the Specialist 5 Terry Lee McClanahan Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 26 to name the Officer Cassie Johnson Fallen Heroes Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 36 to name the John Calvin J.C. Baker Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 46, Donald Homer Wheeler Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 47, William Earl Duty Memorial Bridge. House Concurrent Resolution 48 to name the Sergeant John S. Siner Memorial Highway. House Concurrent Resolution 49 to name the Charles M. Biggs Memorial Roadway. House Concurrent Resolution 50 to name the John Ellison Memorial Roadway. House Concurrent Resolution 52, Roy E. Gibbons Memorial Road. And House Concurrent Resolution 61, Timothy Wayne Farley Memorial Bridge, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each be adopted.
That report will be received. Are there further standing committee reports? If not, select committee reports.
Your Select Committee on Jails and Prisons has had under consideration House Bill 4375 to ensure that imposition of certain sexual offenses applies to those persons working in juvenile facilities against juveniles detained or committed in juvenile facilities, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but that it first be referred to the Committee on the Judiciary.
That report will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your Select Committee on Jails and Prisons has had under consideration House Bill 4371, adding Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation employees who work at institutions managed by the Commissioner to the Survivor Benefits Act, and reports the same back with amendment with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Select Committee on Jails and Prisons has had under consideration House Bill 4497, relating to the repeal of the article governing the Regional Jail and Correctional Facility Authority Board, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Select Committee on Jails and Prisons has had under consideration House Bill 4490, extending the expiration date of the freeze of the per diem cost for incarcerated inmates in regional jails, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Select Committee on Tourism and Economic Diversification has had under consideration House Bill 4654 to provide for downstream tax credits for companies who manufacture steel and steel products in West Virginia, and House Bill 4658, Critical Mineral Reinvestment Tax Credit, and reports the same back with the recommendation that they each do pass, but that they first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received. The bill will be referred. Those bills will both be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Select Committee on Tourism and Economic Diversification has had under consideration House Bill 4657. The purpose of this bill is to create the Critical Mineral Investment Act of 2022, and reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, but that it first be referred to the Committee on Finance.
That report will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance. Are there further reports of select committees? If not, is there any objection to briefly returning to the second order of business momentarily? Okay, if not, ladies and gentlemen, the chair has an introduction this morning. The chair had a few moments earlier before we gavelled into session today to visit with the students that were joining us today for the School for the Deaf and the Blind, and the chair had the opportunity to meet Audrey Mattingly, who is here with us today. And Audrey advises the chair that her career goal is to be the Speaker of this House. Chair advised Audrey there is not yet a vacancy, but we look forward to the day when you can do that. Welcome.
Thank you.
Senate messages.
Mr. Speaker, introduction.
Lady 49th.
Thank you. In the West Gallery today, I have a constituent visiting me from Grafton, West Virginia, Rodney Golf. If he would stand, the House make him welcome.
Introductions. Senate messages.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed without amendment House Bill 4024, creating a cosmetology apprentice program that allows companies to train employees for practical real-world experience.
That message be received.
Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has concurred in the House amendments and passed committee substitute for House Bill 4067 to make certain agency reports electronic or eliminating certain agency reports altogether.
That report will be received, or message will be received.
The Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed with amendment and title amendment committee substitute for House Bill 4276 WVU to create a Parkinson's disease registry.
That message will be received. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment changed the creation of the Parkinson's disease registry by WVU from making it mandatory to permissive. It removed the specific data that was required to be collected. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move the House concur with the amendment and the title amendment.
Question before the House is the motion by the lady from the 49th that the House concur in the amendment and title amendment made by the Senate to committee substitute for House Bill 4276. Is there debate on the motion? If not, those in favor of adoption of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. Okay, the ayes have it. The chair declares those amendments adopted. Question now before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Okay, if not, the question is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will per the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There were 94 ayes, 1 nay, and 5 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4276, WVU to create a Parkinson's disease registry.
Are there further title amendments? If not, the title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the bill take effect from passage.
The lady from the 49th moves that the bill be made effective from passage. Those in favor of that motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will per the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 95 ayes, 0 nays, and 5 members absent. 2/3 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next Senate message.
Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has concurred in the House amendments and passed Senate Bill 450, updating definitions of West Virginia Personal Income Tax Act.
Message be received.
Clerk of the Senate announces that the Senate has passed the following bills. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 476 relating to imposition of minimum severance tax on coal.
The message be received. That bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Senate Bill 478 relating to neighborhood investment program.
Message be received, and that bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 508 requiring certain attire for deer hunters with muzzle loaders.
The message be received, and that bill will be referred to the Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources, then the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 509 relating to County Board of Education employee personal leave.
The message be received, and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Education, then the Committee on Finance.
Senate Bill 526, supplementing and amending appropriations to Department of Commerce, Office of Secretary.
The message be received, and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Senate Bill 527, supplementing and amending appropriations to Department of Administration, Office of Technology.
The message be received, and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 528, supplementing and amending appropriations to DHHR, Consolidated Medical Services Fund.
The message be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 537, providing additional firefighters and security guards for National Guard.
The message be received, and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 560, defining Class 2 e-bikes.
The message be received, and that bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary. Are there further Senate messages? If not, resolutions.
House Resolution 14, a resolution condemning calls to defund the police.
Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated in the delegate console system.
The lady from the 49th asked unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and that each resolution be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Petitions? Motions? Bills introduced?
House Bill 4678 to acknowledge that the mental health of higher education students is of paramount importance and due to a variety of issues.
Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system.
The lady from the 49th asked unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2598, modifying the inspection requirements and the definition of an above-ground storage tank.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? No objections are heard. Jim the 10th, Delegate Kelly to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. This committee substitute changes the Above-Ground Storage Tank Act. The purpose of this bill is to reduce compliance costs on oil and gas operators who have expressed concerns that they might need to plug marginal wells. We passed a similar bill last year. The new version is a result of discussions with DEP and DOH and other interested parties. It achieves a reduction in compliance costs with minimal sacrifice to tank inspections. Under the definition of an above-ground storage tank, small tanks containing hydrocarbon fluids that are in a zone of peripheral concern are exempted out. This committee substitute inserts transmission and storage into the exception and thus slightly broadening the exception. Next, language was added which prevents DEP from requiring regulated tanks to be lifted, moved, or physically altered during a visual leak inspection unless there is a fluid release. This will reduce the risk of tank failure. Finally, a subsection added to ensure that tanks used for hydrocarbon production and snow and ice treatment in zones of critical concern are self-inspected annually. This will lessen the regulatory burden on operators who now must hire engineers for those inspections. The same subsection will also require secondary containment inspections once per month. Currently, the secondary containment inspection is once every 2 weeks. Mr. Speaker, that is the bill, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 37th, Douglas Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Vice Chair yield? Thank you, sir. I'm not as familiar with this bill as I am with the one last year. I believe that one went through a couple committees. Did this just go through the Energy Committee only?
This was originally sent to the Energy and Manufacturing Committee and secondly to the Health Committee. And after discussions with DEP and agreements with DEP, the second reference to the Health Committee was waived.
Okay, so it went through one committee. You said that it slightly changes the exemptions for above-ground storage tanks within the, and we're just talking about within the zone of critical concern, because we've already exempted a bunch that are outside of it, but inside the zone of critical concern, where it is close to public water intakes, what did we change? What is now exempted? If this passes, what is exempted that isn't? What type of tank is exempted?
To the gentleman from the 37th, this bill would eliminate an inspection every 3 years by a registered engineer and replace that inspection as a self-inspection by the operator once annually. It would actually increase the number of inspections.
But it would, okay, that's not the question asked is what type of tank? What would they be storing? What would the tanks be storing that we now require them to self-inspect as opposed to having a
a third party inspect it? What's in the tank that would only be inspected by the operator?
Actually, the main chemical in that tank would be brine salt water.
The main chemical. What other
Yes.
chemicals?
There may be residue from other oil and gas residues as well.
Okay, those are the only type of, that's the only type of tank we exempted, just brine?
That's the only tank that we're exempting, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Hydrocarbons.
Oh, hydrocarbon also?
Yes.
Okay. But does that include benzene?
It would.
Okay, so it's not just brine, it has benzene in it. Thank you very much for yielding.
Possibly. Can't say for sure, but it possibly would.
Okay. Thank you for yielding, sir. May I briefly address the bill?
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
I really wish that this bill would have gone through more than one committee. It affects a whole lot of people. We're talking about the zones of critical concern. We're talking about storage tanks that are very close to public water intakes. That goes into our drinking water, our constituents' drinking water. Unfortunately, the district that I represent and the district a lot of you represent were negatively impacted when a storage tank inside a zone of critical concern did leak in 2014. So I know firsthand the effects of this. And when you're talking about just a brine tank, there's more than, it's not just salt water. There's a whole lot of stuff in there and things that you don't want to drink and you don't want your constituents to drink. I would just urge the body to reject this bill. It was said that this is what we are doing at the request of the operator. Let's do something at the request of our constituents who need water to live. We all need it. Republicans drink water. Democrats drink water. The unborn needs water. Let's be pro-life and vote against it.
The gentleman to 7th, Dr. Barnhart's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak to the bill.
Gentleman's recognized.
I rise today in strong support of House Bill 2598. I want to talk to you just for a moment about how this impacts my district. Of all the bills that we passed last session, of all the good we did to move our state forward, at the end of every session, most of you are probably like me, you're always, instead of celebrating the successes, you're always thinking about the job left undone. What was the unfinished business? Well, one of the big items left undone last session was making a much-needed reform to how we handle regulation of above-ground storage tanks in the state. All summer and all fall, I heard from numerous small oil and gas producers throughout not just my area, but from across the state of West Virginia about how critical it was that we take a look at passing House Bill 2598 into law. For those of you that recall, like the gentleman was alluding to, the reason for this law being put into place several years ago came out of an issue that had absolutely nothing to do with oil and gas wells. It had to do with a chemical spill down here in the Kanawha Valley. And while that situation was terribly unfortunate, I know a lot of people who have been impacted by that situation. At the end of the day, these burdensome over-regulations, the ripple effect coming out of this law that was passed several years ago, is tremendously adversely impacting our small producers across the state, and to an extent, regulating them to the point of driving them away from our great state. There's been a ripple effect. And essentially what it has done for some of our small producers, I'm going to be blunt and honest with you, it's created a potential do not enter sign into our state and given them another reason not to do business here in West Virginia and to do business across our lines. Do it across our lines. Someone who represents an area that's heavily reliant on a strong oil and gas economy, I cannot possibly express enough how critical this bill is to our economy in the Mid-Ohio Valley. For my area, Ritchie County, Pleasants County, Tyler County, Doddridge County, the oil and gas development, it's not just a business. It's a way of life for us. It's truly a way of life. And this year, with the help of the stakeholders, we made a good bill better. We made a good bill even better. We took the recommendations from the DEP. We took the recommendations from the DOH. We listened to all the stakeholders involved, like what we should do on any piece of legislation impacting the people of West Virginia. And yesterday, by way of amendment from the gentleman from the 10th, we made every effort possible to address the areas of critical concern. And you know, the beauty of our legislative process down here in Charleston is that when something creates an undue burden, when we make a mistake, when there is a ripple effect, when we have an unintended consequence, we have the opportunity, not just the opportunity, but the obligation to make it right. And that's what we have the opportunity to do today. This bill will help small oil and gas producers across West Virginia continue to do business in this state and to remove a barrier that is holding back job creation and further downstream development. You know, in previous years, this body has enacted numerous pieces of legislation for tax incentives for downstream industries, and this bill will strengthen our position in attracting those good-paying jobs and opportunities for communities not just like mine, but for your communities all across West Virginia. And I'm just going to close with saying this. If you support small business owners, if you support keeping energy jobs here in this state, you need to press the green button on this bill. Let's modernize this. Let's get it right. Let's support this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I urge passage.
Chairman of 51st, Doug Hansen is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the above-ground storage tank passed in 2014, it was a unanimous vote in the House and in the state Senate. And as I said yesterday, it's been chipped away at little by little almost every year since then. When it was originally passed, something like 60,000 tanks were regulated, and it was recognized that that was perhaps a little bit too far-reaching. So provisions were put into the Act to focus regulation on the tanks that present the most threat to drinking water. This Above Ground Storage Tank Act is really about protecting drinking water. And that focus was provided in a couple ways. It categorized tanks based on whether they're a level 1 tank in the zone of critical concern or a level 2 tank a little bit further away, or all the other tanks. And all the other tanks were removed from regulation. All that was left was the level 2 tanks that are a little bit further away and the level 1 tanks that are immediately upstream from drinking water intakes up to a 5-hour travel time. And the Act further clarified that the regulatory program that the DEP puts forward, that the tanks in the zone of critical concern shall be regulated to a higher standard of tank and secondary containment integrity based upon their proximity to public water supply sources. That's paraphrased from what's actually in the Above Ground Storage Tank Act. That's our policy that we put into place that remains in the Act, that these tanks in a zone of critical concern shall be regulated to a higher standard because they're close to drinking water intakes. The bill before us today specifically targets some of those tanks that we're supposed to be holding to a higher level of scrutiny. Those tanks from the oil and gas industry, the oil and gas waste tanks that are in zones of critical concern. And it does it in a way by reducing the requirements for inspections. Now, the current requirements for inspections of these tanks, like any tank in a zone of critical concern, was hashed out through negotiations years ago. Originally, it was put forward that a registered professional engineer should inspect these tanks every year, but there was pushback to that. So compromise was made, and there are alternatives to a registered professional engineer performing these inspections. Somebody can do the inspection under their direct supervision. Somebody can do the inspection if they're certified by the Steel Tank Institute or another certifying body. And we even put something in there that somebody could certify these tanks, inspect these tanks if they're certified by any other program that the DEP says is okay. There's actually 4 options to reduce the burden, to make it so it doesn't have to be an expensive professional engineer. And not only that, but a compromise was made that the inspections by the professional engineer or the other qualified person don't have to happen annually. In the zone of critical concern, those only happen once every 3 years. The other 2 years, the owner-operator can go ahead and perform the inspections themselves. So there have already been compromises placed into the act, placed into the rules to respond to the concerns that people have raised about the cost of these inspections. So let's say it costs $1,000 to do the inspection. If you only have to do that once every 3 years, it's just $300 a year. Is that too high of a cost to make sure that our drinking water is pure? I don't think it is. I think it's appropriate. We've already narrowed down the scope of this act. We've exempted out thousands, tens of thousands of tanks. We have less stringent regulations for the ones that are further away. But for the ones that are immediately upstream of our drinking water intakes, let's maintain what we have, require these inspections, make sure that our drinking water stays pure.
Question again before the House is shall the bill pass. Is there debate on the bill? Lady in the 51st, Doug Fleshauer is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am really astonished as somebody who was here in 2014 when 300,000 people lost their water, that we would be saying today that self-inspection of tanks inside the zone of critical concern is fine. Self-inspection is fine. You know, there was a famous president that is lionized by many people in here who said, trust but verify. And I think that all the attempts that the delegate from Monongalia talked about to verify these self-inspections, including what we used to have was inspection by the DEP, they're important because there are people like those who owned the Freedom tanks who didn't do self-inspection. They were required to do self-inspection. The DEP didn't do inspections. And 300,000 people lost their water for months, including everyone here who was here and needed to drink water in the state capitol. This is not an acceptable compromise. This is not a compromise. This is trusting people to do everything right about our drinking water. We have rules and regulations because it's about safety. I urge a no vote.
Gentleman the 8th, Doug Anderson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the passage of this bill. The bill simply, as the Vice Chair pointed out, essentially does two things. It eliminates the requirement of a registered professional engineer every third year to inspect a tank. That relieves the operators of an expense, as small operators in the state desperately try to stay in business, given the low gas prices of recent years. The other thing that's done, an every 2-week inspection of the secondary containment areas. For those of you who don't know what a secondary containment area is, it's simply usually a wall of dirt built around the tank that's capable of containing the entire contents of the tank should any leak occur. Last year, information I got as we debated a bill that went to the Senate and did not make it, there have been fewer than 10 any kinds of leaks at all across the entire state that the DEP had to deal with. So let's get down to it. The tanks in the zones of critical concern are not exempted from anything except that every 3-year inspection by a registered professional engineer, and the purpose of that is to relieve some of the cost expense. The operator is still responsible if there is a leak. The DEP will enforce remediation. The information I have received, that very, very seldom does this occur anywhere in the state. Oil and gas inspectors can go to the site at any time and inspect to ensure that the integrity of the tanks, the operation, is maintaining both what is needed to protect the people of this state. I share with the lady from Monongalia. I was here when we had the rupture of the tank in a number of years ago that precipitated this legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, I was also here when the Speaker of this House, not the present Speaker, triple referenced that bill to committee. He was accused of trying to do all kinds of evil things. The Senate rushed the bill to us, and it went through the committee process here so that we could create the best bill possible. And still, we have found that we need to go back and reopen this code and deal with this legislation to meet the needs of the citizens of this state. The tanks are still going to be self-inspected by the operators. The tanks are going to have the potential to be inspected at any time by people from the Office of Oil and Gas. We have another problem in this state, and that is a problem of 4,000 to 5,000 abandoned oil and gas wells where operators have gone out of business. We can't find them, and we are desperately trying to find the money to plug those. We don't need to drive any more operators out of business in bankruptcy and accumulate additional tanks to desperately try to figure out how to plug. This helps operators stay in business. It helps their employees continue to have their jobs. It provides, in some cases, free gas for people that heat their homes. This bill was drafted with consultation with the Department of Environmental Protection. Their input was taken. It attempts to correct some of the things that caused our sister body across the other end of the Capitol to not take up this bill last year. I think it strikes a balance between the need to protect the water of the people of this state and to protect an industry in this state that is important to the state in both creating jobs, providing energy for this state, and for the future of this state. I rise in support of the bill and ask for your support. This House overwhelmingly sent the bill to the Senate last year. They found it went a little bit too far. We have reached in, tried to modify it in a way that hopefully the Senate will find it satisfactory this year. Again, I ask for your support. Thank you.
Gentleman 67, Doug Doyle is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just don't comprehend how removing a DEP inspection can mean that the people of the state are protected. I think one DEP inspection is worth a lot more than 3 self-inspections. So I would have been fine if they wanted to. I think the right way to do this would have been to add the annual self-inspections to the one DEP inspection every 3 years. Then I think the people would be protected. But they are not now, and this is a bill that will once again run the risk of dirty drinking water. Thank you.
The question before the House, shall the bill pass? Gentleman the 10th, Doug Conley is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I definitely rise in support of this bill, and I'm going to come at it from a little bit different angle than what I've been hearing. Until recently, I owned a manufacturing company, and I spoke to this last year. I have been involved in manufacturing tanks in my previous life, and I can tell you firsthand from being on these sites dozens, if not hundreds of times, and someone that has built dozens, if not hundreds upon hundreds of these tanks, the extent that these people go to make sure they do not have leaks. And I'm not just talking about the tanks that are in question today of 1,320 gallons. I'm even talking about the smaller tanks that are not necessarily regulated. These people go to the extent of not making these tanks out of steel like they all were at one time. More often than not, they're stainless or they're aluminum. Consistently, I was building tanks that was basically a containment tank inside of a containment tank, a double box, a double wall. So the extent that I have personally seen that these producers go through to make sure that there is no leaks gives me 100% confidence that I can stand up here and support this bill wholeheartedly.
Is there further debate on the bill? Gentleman 37, Dr. Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for recognizing me again. I'll keep it brief. The gentleman was correct. The chair was correct when he said that the above-ground storage tank bill was triple reference. That means 75 sets of eyes were on that bill. Not this bill. It went through one committee. It went through one committee, and it has the potential of affecting a whole lot of people in this state if one tank leaks in the zone of critical concern and into our constituents' water supply. I know we want to do what we can for the small operators, for the oil and gas companies. I know we want to do what we can for these businesses. I can tell you, in my district, we saw many businesses close their doors, never to reopen in 2014 after that chemical spill. After the last census, we saw a huge drop here in Kanawha County in the areas that were affected by that chemical spill. It caused the greatest outward migration from this part of the state I've ever seen. So protecting water is good for business, it's good for people. Vote no.
Is there further debate on the bill? Does the gentleman from the 10th, Kelly, wish to close debate on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for a healthy debate. You know, we looked at this bill, we took it up last year, we discussed it last year, we passed it last year on a vote of 74-26 and sent it to the Senate. Wasn't good enough for the Senate, they didn't take it up. We brought it back up this year, we renegotiated the bill, we brought DEP in it, we brought Department of Highways in it. We have a bill that I believe that the Senate can endorse. The DEP is in total agreement with this bill. They actually helped write the language. During our discussions, I asked members of DEP, I said, have we had any leaks that those chemicals made it to the water supply? And the answer was no, have not. If you go to Walmart on a Sunday afternoon when it's raining, and you look around on the ground and you see those pools of water with rainbow slick on top of it, that's the very chemicals that you would find in this tank. A Walmart parking lot has no secondary retainer, and the chances of those chemicals getting to the water supply are greater from the Walmart parking lot than they are from one of these level 1 tanks. We have tried to cover the bases. We're trying to keep our oil and gas producers in business. We're trying to reduce the number of abandoned wells, and we believe that we've done our work. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, members, I encourage passage of the bill. Thank you.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there were 77 ayes, 22 nays, and 1 member absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2598, modifying the inspection requirements and the definition of an above-ground storage tank.
Are there amendments to the title?
Delegate Jay Kelly moves to amend the title.
Question before the House is the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor of the title amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title of the House as amended by the bill will be and remain the title of the bill. Clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4004 relating to limiting an abortion to 15 weeks gestation.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having read? Gentleman from the 17th, Doug Rohrbach, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 4004 prohibits an abortion after 15 weeks unless there's a medical emergency or there's severe fetal abnormality. If an abortion does occur for one of these exceptions, the licensed medical professional shall report such to the Bureau of Public Health. The bill specifies what information is to be reported to the Bureau. The bill provides that if a licensed medical professional violates this section, that person is subject to discipline from his, her, or her licensure board. Additionally, if a person is not a licensed professional, then that person has practiced medicine without a license and is subject to a fine of not more than $10,000 or imprisonment for 1 to 5 years. That's the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4004 was advanced to third reading with an amendment pending. The clerk will please report the amendment.
Delegates Zukoff and Fleischhauer move to amend the bill on page 2, section 1, lines 20 and 26, following the words medical emergency by inserting the words or if the pregnancy was the result of a rape or incest.
The question now before the House is the adoption of the amendment just read by the clerk. Is there debate on the amendment? Is there debate on the amendment? Lady in the fourth, Doug Zukoff is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I come before you today to talk about something that is very difficult to talk about. None of us, I don't believe in this room, want to hurt children, unborn or otherwise. I keep a picture on my desk. It's a picture of my daughter still in childbearing years, at the time my 4-year-old granddaughter, and my brand new born baby 2 years ago of my granddaughter that was born, to remind me that that's why I'm here. Today I offer this amendment to protect the girls and women of West Virginia who are impacted negatively by non-consensual rape and incest that's committed with force and violence and traumatizing the women that are impacted. Yesterday, I shared with you on your desk, and the bill was moved to the next day, some sexual violence statistics from West Virginia. 17% of female students had experienced sexual violence in the prior 12 months. 20% of female college students had experienced sexual violence in the violence 12 months. While overall numbers of violent crime victimizations in the United States decreased 22% from 2019 to 2020, there were no significantly statistical changes in the number of victimizations involving rape and sexual assaults. Sexual violence impacts our most vulnerable citizens. Nearly 27% of rape and sexual assaults involve the victim with a disability. West Virginia has the highest percentage population of people with disabilities of any state in the nation. I called home to see if I could get some statistics for my county. The Sexual Assault Help Center had 18 reports of rape in Marshall County last year. 18. And keep in mind that only 4 of 10 rapes are reported, because this is a very, very difficult subject for people to talk about and for people to listen to. In full disclosure and transparency, I want you to know that I offered this amendment twice in committee, to the Health Committee members and to the Judiciary Committee members, my colleagues, and they failed on a voice vote. So I did try to do this through the committee process, and I feel strongly enough about this that I wanted to bring this amendment before all of you today. Last Monday was Pro-Life Day in the West Virginia Legislature. Like many of you in this room, I had a red rose on my desk that day. My votes about this issue speak for themselves since I've been here. But this bill goes too far. 86 of you in this room, 86 of the men in this room will never, ever have to make this decision. You might have to help a loved one make a decision, but you don't have the ability, obviously you know this, to carry a child. You're never going to have to be a victim of sexual assault that results in a pregnancy. And I'm asking you today to think about the females in your life. Your daughters, your sisters, your nieces, your granddaughters. I've met many of them. We proudly introduce them on the floor in the gallery. And those are happy days, right? But sometimes some of our girls and women, and particularly I'm really, really concerned about girls that are 12 to 15 years old. I walked in this room yesterday and saw the young girls sitting here on the floor and immediately went to the majority leader to talk about them being here while we discuss this amendment. It's so uncomfortable to just talk about. But, ladies and gentlemen, these women and girls that we're talking about have to live this. They have to deal with the force and the trauma. Non-consensual sex we're talking about here. I feel so strongly about this because there was a 14-year-old in my district in Marshall County who was raped by a family member, so it was incest and raped, and became pregnant. And to force that child to not have the decision to make, to decide what could happen, to force her to have to carry a child that's going to remind her every day of the trauma, the violence that she experienced to be impregnated with that child? Is that fair to her? Is that fair to the girls of West Virginia? I don't think it is. And you might ask, does 5 weeks really matter? Our ban right now currently is 20 weeks. I want to read to you some comments. I want to read to you some items why 5 weeks matters, why changing this matters. Common emotional responses of sexually abused children. These are the children that I'm speaking of who can become pregnant as a result of rape and incest. Fear of the abuse, of getting into trouble or getting a loved one into trouble. No one will believe them. Guilt for not being able to stop the abuse, for believing they consented to the abuse in some way, for telling if they told, to keep the secret if they did not tell. Shame. Shame about the abuse, shame about their body's reactions to that abuse, and confusion because of their changing emotions, because they may still love the abuser. Think about that. Someone you love abused you, resulting in a pregnancy, and you have to not only carry that child, but you have to live with them for the rest of that 9 months until you give birth. Think about the pain and anguish that causes. If we pass this bill today, we're taking 5 weeks of decision-making away from those women and children, especially the children. That's who I speak to you today about mostly, the children. Obviously, I care about the women, but these are children that I'm asking you to take into consideration today. I think we're asking with this bill to trade one life for another. And to me, that's just not acceptable. So I ask you to dig deep in your hearts, thinking about those children in your life that you know, they're 12 to 15 years old. I'm asking you to think about them when you're making these decisions. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to request the yeas and nays, and I'd also like to request the option to close, please.
Gentleman 17th, Dr. Rohrbach, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully rise today to urge rejection of the gentlelady's amendment.
Is there debate on the amendment? Lady in 32nd, Doug Kessinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the gentlelady from the 4th. I was actually reading the documents that you placed on our desks yesterday, and I'm really thankful that this is a conversation that's being brought up in the House today, because sexual violence against women is something that we do not talk about enough in this body and in this country. And so while I appreciate the fact that we are having this conversation because it's something that we need to talk about, I am going to urge rejection of the gentlelady's amendment. And the reason is because I believe that circumstances surrounding conception should never determine the value of human life. If we believe that life starts in the womb, then it is our obligation to protect and defend life, regardless of the circumstances surrounding conception. In fact, the gentlelady even used the phrase, to carry a child, to be impregnated with a child. And that insinuates to us that even those who support this amendment understand and recognize that this is a child that is being carried in the womb of an individual. And so while I appreciate the conversation and I appreciate the debate, and I hope that we can continue to talk about ways to prevent sexual violence against women, this amendment does nothing to prevent women from being sexually assaulted and violated. This amendment is not going to stop a single woman from experiencing the trauma of rape or incest, and that's why I would encourage this body to take a strong look at 2 bills that I've co-sponsored with the gentleman from the 29th, House Bill 4519 and House Bill 4508, to increase penalties on men who think it is okay to take women's bodies and use them for their own pleasure, because there is nothing that is more detestable to me and to the people in this room than entities and individuals who think that women's bodies are made for nothing more than their own benefit.
Gentleman third, Doug Fluharty is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Now I want to talk to you about the ramifications of not passing this amendment. So, presuming that there's no medical exception available, this 15-week ban would apply to 15-year-olds, correct?
We are talking about the amendment, but I believe that speaks to the bill, but the gentleman is correct.
And it would also apply to 14-year-olds, correct?
Again, would the gentleman refer his comments to the amendment or the bill?
Well, we're talking about the ramifications if the amendment doesn't pass.
I believe on debate right now we are on the amendment. Is the gentleman not correct?
So you don't want to answer my question? Is that what this is?
I believe if the speaker could clarify, are we debating the amendment or the bill?
We're debating the amendment, the effects of not passing it, which goes to the bill itself.
Would the gentleman confine his remarks to the amendment?
Okay. This amendment would allow for an exception for rape and incest, correct?
Gentleman, be correct.
The current bill without the amendment does not have that exception available, does it?
To the gentleman, when we get to the bill, that will be a debatable motion.
Oh my God. Okay. I'm not done. We're not done yet. Does a rapist have parental rights in West Virginia?
I'm sorry, could you gentlemen repeat his...
Does a rapist have parental rights in the state of West Virginia?
Is that stated in this, the gentlelady's amendment?
It's directly related to the amendment. The amendment talks about exceptions for rape and incest. It is directly related to the amendment. We can get a ruling from the chair that says so, or you can just answer my questions.
Let's get a ruling from the chair.
Gentleman will state the question.
He doesn't want to answer my questions that are directly related to the amendment. The amendment specifically talks about rape and incest exceptions for child rape victims in the state of West Virginia.
The chair will rule that the question is germane. It's up to the gentleman whether he does or does not wish to answer it.
Okay, the gentleman restate his question.
The current amendment applies to rape and incest.
Gentleman is correct.
My question was posed previously. Does the current bill allow for an exception for rape and incest?
The current bill that will be in front of us does not.
Thank you. Now, without that exception, would it apply to 15-year-old child rape victims?
Gentleman would be correct.
And it would also apply to 14-year-old child rape victims?
Gentleman would be correct.
And 13-year-old child rape victims?
Gentleman would be correct.
And does a rapist in the state of West Virginia have parental rights?
Gentleman, restate that.
Does a rapist in the state of West Virginia have parental rights?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, you have counsel with you. He may be able to help you with these questions.
Counsel doesn't know the answer either.
Would the chairman of judiciary yield questions?
My best shot.
Sure. You heard the question. Does a rapist in the state of West Virginia have parental rights?
I'm not positive, but I don't know any restrictions specifically that would restrict parental rights.
So
but I can't speak definitively without doing any research.
Is your understanding that this, if a child rape victim is forced to carry a child to term, that there would be a court process involved with the rapist involved regarding parental rights?
The father of the child, is that who you're speaking of?
Yes, the
and
rapist.
That father was convicted of rape? Is that what the question is?
That's what the question is.
There could be a court proceeding.
Okay. To that point, does the state of West Virginia first require a conviction before it could be petitioned to the court to extinguish parental rights?
I'm unsure.
Okay, you're unsure. You have no reason to disagree with me if I told you that it requires a conviction, correct?
I think you're correct.
Okay, so it does require a conviction. How long would that potentially take? Could that take years?
Could.
It could take years. So the child rape victim who's 15, 14, 13, or 12 would have to go through the legal process while her rapist is pending the court and trying to get parental rights.
It's possible.
That's possible. Thank you. Thank you for yielding to questions. Very briefly to the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
I thank the Judiciary Chairman for yielding to questions. He seemed ready for it more so than the actual presenter of this bill. But I just want to give you analysis of what you're voting on. We need this exception. It's for the 15-year-olds and 14-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 12-year-olds who are victims of rape or incest. We're standing up for those victims. Day in and day out, we pass pieces of legislation designed to stand up for victims. This amendment does just that. The process now in the state of West Virginia, the victim of rape or incest will be brought back into court to confront their rapist, potentially for years, until there's a conviction. And even upon a conviction, they get re-victimized with every court appearance. Re-victimized. The rapist could then petition the court until a judge decides whether it is in the best interest of the child or not. Until a judge decides, the discretion of the court, year in and year out, re-victimizing this child victim. It's not how we should operate. This is an amendment that protects children, protects victims of rape or incest. And it needs to be supported. You know, we cleared out the children that were in front of me prior to this bill being taken up, and I think I know why. It's not easy to talk about, but it affects them. They're not sitting in front of me right now, but many are sitting in the gallery right now. They don't want to be re-victimized. They don't want to have to face their rapist over and over again. Support the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman 29th, Douglas Steele, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, there is some validity to what the gentleman from the 3rd said. You know, we don't have anything that is, you know, I guess to where, yes, you would have to have a court proceeding before any type of parental rights were either terminated or suspended in the event of a rapist siring a child with the victim. Now, there are other ways of dealing with this, and one of the things that you do have to remember is if this individual is charged with first-degree sexual assault or even on down the line from there, the first thing that's going to be entered in that case is bond. You know, the individual will be arraigned in that matter. As a condition of that bond, they're going to have no contact with the victim. So while the victim is carrying or the child, so to speak, there would be no contact. Now, after birth, the mother, in that instance, would list a putative father on a birth certificate or something of that nature. Now, while there's no contact order in place, the other thing that I have seen happen is domestic violence advocates and women's advocates and folks like that get a restraining order during the pendency of these types of matters for the mother and the child. And those are routinely granted in some of the cases that I've seen. I'll be honest with you, I mainly dealt with drug crime when I was a prosecutor, but I did have a few instances of dealing with sexual assault crime. And one particular that I remember pretty well was a a 13-year-old female that we had to watch all through that process. And it does take time. It does take time to get convictions in these cases. You know, potentially they could go on for a couple years. I would say probably on average 9 months to a year would be what you're looking at because of the different lab results and things that have to come back. Now, you know, as the gentleman stated, there is going to be some time where you're going to have to go through court and different things like that. You know, that's the American system of justice, okay? You know, no one is guilty of a crime until they've been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I think we talked about that maybe yesterday, of folks having due process and things like that. Now, during the pendency of those proceedings, though, routinely, and as part of every bond I have ever seen, there is no contact with the victim. So I don't foresee any instance where someone who's been arraigned upon on bond for the charge of raping someone or sexually assaulting someone, that they're going to be granted some type of visitation with a child, because they're going to be bound by the terms of their bond and not able to do that. You know, the other thing is, you know, until there is a conviction for that, until there is a conviction, you're innocent until proven guilty. Yes, that person does have the potential to file a petition for parental rights in family court. The gentleman's absolutely right about that. What would typically happen in that instance is a family court judge would issue an order staying the proceedings during the pendency of the criminal matter, due to the fact that it would be a violation of the bond conditions for that putative parent to have visitation with potentially the victim. You know, I didn't plan on weighing in on this today, but you know, I do think it's important that we clear up that we do have adequate things in place to take care of things like this. This is not something that is going to be easily, you know, to give parental rights to a potential rapist. So I don't think that's a rational fear at this point. And to support the gentlelady from the 32nd, I'm reminded of having researched this issue in the past in different types of cases. Our Supreme Court, a very, very, very long time ago, when it had to do with the birth of a child after someone had gotten a vasectomy, the gentleman that got the vasectomy attempted to sue the physician that failed at his job of doing the vasectomy. And the case law that came from our Supreme Court was, a very long time ago, the birth of a child is a blessing for which no damages can be awarded. And that's something that I think, you know, when we hear today of the trauma and the heartbreak that can come from these events as we talk about them, I would join the gentlelady from the 32nd in what she said, in that out of the ashes of great tragedy, the glory of God can shine. And there is no child for which the Lord's forsaken. And I think that's important that we remember that today. So I would support the chairman, and I would support the gentlelady from the 32nd and what they said, and urge rejection of the amendment.
Lady in the 51st, like a flesh hour is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think some people in this room seem to forget that there are people of differing religions, and some with no religions. And I would like to remind some of you of what one of our ministers, who is a Christian minister, pointed out in our newspaper recently. One of the things he pointed out is that Jesus in the New Testament said nothing about abortion. And he also pointed out, as I mentioned in another debate, that Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 says that when God created life, it began with breath, not with the moment of conception. The problem with the fact that we have these differing beliefs is that this bill involves the government inserting itself into our lives and our decisions. And it's especially relevant on the issue of rape and incest. The government is compelling, forcing women to bear children against their will. That's the effect of not going along with this amendment. We are forcing victims to bear children against their wills. We are forcing children, and they are younger than 12 sometimes, to bear children against their will, and some of them don't even have any idea how, what has happened to them. They've been victimized. I just think it's disgusting. We have different views, but that's my view, is that forcing little girls and forcing victims of rape and incest to bear children that they do not want to bear is not what the government should be doing.
Lady from the 4th, Douglas Zukoff, to close debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my colleague my friend from the 32nd, I appreciate your comments, and like you, I believe that life begins at conception. I believe that, and like our colleague, the chair of GovOrg, I believe him also, that God takes care of our children and that we are supposed to do that as well. And I believe that our God is good and that he will take care of a child that doesn't come into this world if the other person who has been forcibly raped is forced to carry that child. This bill, thus this amendment, gives rape and incest victims 5 additional weeks to make a decision. For those of you men in the room, menstrual cycles aren't always on time. Many women, many girls have issues with being on time, having regular periods. Let's just go there and be honest. So, gives them 5 more weeks to understand that they may even be pregnant. And I'm not going to go into all of the discussions around why they might not want to come forth. This gives them 5 extra weeks to make the decision. And remember, we love to talk in this body, we like to talk about freedom and choice. There was no freedom given to the girls and women that we're talking about in this amendment. No freedom to make that decision. This pregnancy was forced on them through violence, through a violent act. I ask that you not penalize them any longer than they have to be, that we make this exception 5 weeks is what this exception does to our law. I'd like to just leave you with a quote as we go to vote. One doesn't have to operate with great malice to do great harm. The absence of empathy and understanding are sufficient. By Charles Blow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Roll call vote on the amendment was demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is, shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 21 ayes, 78 nays, 1 member absent. Less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that amendment lost. Are there further amendments? If not, the clerk will read the bill a 3rd time.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4004, relating to limiting an abortion to 15 weeks gestation.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman from the 6th, Delegate Kelly, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a tough situation. It forces us to take a stand, forces us to dig down and say, what do I believe? What is it I believe? Well, I'm pro-life, but you know, I respect my colleagues' right to disagree with that, and I still respect you wholeheartedly for your beliefs. But Mr. Speaker, if I might share a story so maybe people could understand why I'm pro-life, why I call myself unapologetically pro-life. In 1999, I was in Durham, I was in college, and my wife was at the apartment, and we got a phone call. And it was one of our daughters who was single and pregnant and scared. And she had just left her doctor, and her doctor had said that there were some abnormalities, that something didn't look right with the baby. And the suggestion was that she abort. So my daughter called my wife and was panicked. What should we do? What can I do? And my wife managed to get the words in, don't make any decision until we get home. Yet she was forced to stay for several more weeks by herself, wondering if the child would be okay. She did decide to carry the baby full term, and excuse me for just a minute. And on December 28th, 1999, my wife, or my daughter, gave birth to a perfect, beautiful baby. This wouldn't have, if this bill had passed in '99, this wouldn't even have been a consideration, but it was then. She's beautiful. And for that reason, I stand before you saying that I urge passage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 43rd, Douglas Thompson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk to you today about someone that was very special to me. This was my grandmother, Mary Frances Shiflett. She was my mama. I had her for most of my life. She passed away. She was 84 years old. She was a postmaster. She ran a store. She had 7 children, 9 grandchildren, and 13 great-grandchildren when she passed away. She was the matriarch of our family. When I was in elementary school, my mom worked, and I would get off the school bus and I would go to my grandma's house, and she'd always cook me an afternoon snack and dinner and give me a cookie, and we'd play games. She was a stamp collector. And we come from a big family. Like I said, there were 7 kids, a lot of grandkids, Sunday dinners, house was full, everyone talking, laughing. But I found out something when I got a little bit older that I didn't know about, and that was my grandma was pregnant for an 8th time with her 8th child. But I didn't have an uncle or an aunt, because on her 8th pregnancy, she was excited. They had a bassinet. They were excited to have this new baby, big family. She developed intrauterine cancer. And they had to make a very hard decision, one that they didn't want to make. And she made that hard decision and began treatment for her intrauterine cancer. And I'm glad she made that decision, because I got to meet her, I got to know her, and I got to experience her love. And why I say that, because around the same time she developed intrauterine cancer while she was pregnant, Her sister-in-law did as well on their second or third baby. She had the choice to, and she made a decision to keep. And she began treatment afterward. After she delivered the baby, she began treatment. But unfortunately, by that time, it was too late. It had spread too far, and she passed away. So my grandma made a decision. She began treatment, very rapid treatment, very aggressive treatment, and she survived. My concern with this bill, like my friend from Marshall was talking about earlier, my voting record speaks for itself. You can see this. But this goes too far. This is a concern that if this bill would be in effect now, this would have limited my grandmother's ability to make the decision that she had to make. So friends and colleagues, I urge you to think about this. Think about the hard decision my grandma had to make. Think about that. And think about the love and life she had to raise her 7 children, to partially raise her grandchildren, keep us out of trouble, her great-grandchildren, all those Sunday dinners, all the Christmases and the Thanksgivings. That was her favorite holiday, Thanksgiving. She actually passed away on Thanksgiving. But I want you all to think about that, and please consider the ramifications that this bill will have on folks making that decision. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from 36, Delegate Barrick.
All righty. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to try to change anyone's mind. I'm pretty sure we've got the vote already set here, and I'm not going to get emotional about anything. But I just want to get up and talk about that. For one thing, I like the delegate from the 6th District. I respect everybody's viewpoint on this. We've all gone through, this is something that's a very important topic. We've all come up with our own decisions because of different reasons, our life experiences, things like that. And so I respect what everyone feels about this. But I just want to say, actually, we're kind of more on the same page than we realize. That, you know, we have different labels, pro-life, pro-choice. Nobody's pro-abortion. Nobody goes around and says, hey, we need to have more abortions, or, you know, they're great, you know. I think we'd all like to see abortions end. But I believe we have different ways of coming up with a solution for that. And making abortion illegal or much more restrictive isn't going to stop it. I mean, all we have to do is go back to Prohibition in 1920. When the religious right wanted to do away with alcohol, and they did, and all that did was take away a lot of revenue from alcohol. A lot of people died from alcohol poisoning, from bad brews, and we created the mafia, basically. And by 1933, we found out that was not the way to do it. An authoritarian measure was not the way to do it. The Dominican Republic has completely outlawed abortion. They still have abortions. They have thousands of them a year. How do they know they have them? Because of the number of women that come in that need treatment because of self-induced abortions are going to illegal clinics. And so a lot of those women die. So that's not exactly a pro-life solution. You got a lot of, still have a lot of abortions, and a lot of women are dying from this. So the only way to really eliminate abortion is to go after the demand, to decrease the demand. And I bet that a lot of you don't know that almost half of the pregnancies in the United States every year are unwanted or unplanned. And those are the ones that are most at risk for ending up with an abortion. And but unfortunately, a lot of the people that are against abortion, that are anti-abortion, pro-life, don't want to support sex ed in the classroom or making birth control available very easily and very cheaply or for free. And if we could do that, we would really turn things around. We would stop the unwanted and unplanned pregnancies, and that would decrease the abortion rate quite a bit. You have a 16-year-old girl who's in high school. She gets pregnant. What does she do? She ends up quitting school, getting a minimum wage job. Where's dad? He's gone. He's long gone. He's not there. He doesn't have any responsibility. That child is doomed to a substandard life. Mom might go around from guy to guy. The kid gets passed around. If that same girl is allowed is taught about how to prevent or delay becoming pregnant until she becomes, say, 22, 24, she's gotten her education, she's married, she's in a stable family relationship. This child now comes into a welcoming home, so she has a child, maybe 2 or 3. These children are raised as responsible adults. This is what society needs more than the first example, and that's all we have to do. Is we're just talking about planning and helping people make wise decisions, and I think that's where we need to go. Instead of just making this illegal, we need to work with people and come up with a good plan. And the delegate from the 6th told a very good story, and I've got a story also about how choice touched my life. Same year, 1999. I wish all of you had been able to meet my late wife, Karen. She was a saint, just a wonderful woman, and one of the beautiful inside and out. I can't believe I'm doing this. Anyway, she was born, unfortunately, with a debilitating disease, a deadly disease called cystic fibrosis. It's a genetic disease. It affects the lungs, the digestive system, and then basically everything. And when she was born, she was diagnosed at 2, and the doctor told her father that if she makes it to 9, she'll be lucky. And she made it to 43, just because that's the kind of person she was. She wasn't going to let it beat her. And one of the side effects of cystic fibrosis is it's very hard to become pregnant for women. So we just assumed we were going to be childless. And so we just accepted that. Well, one day, as often happened, my wife didn't feel very well. She went to see the doctor, as she often did. The doctor examines her, and he says, Mrs. Barrick, you are pregnant. And she's like, whoa, okay. And he says, well, because you have cystic fibrosis, we're going to put you under the care of a high-risk pregnancy doctor. And so we went to see that doctor, and he examined her, and he said, because of your age, she was 30, and your situation, he says, I highly recommend you terminate this pregnancy. And she said, okay. And so we went back home, and we sat down, and I said, well, what are we going to do? And she said, I'm going to have this baby. And I said, well, you heard what the doctor said. He told you that there's a very good chance that you, the child, or both are not going to survive this pregnancy. And she said, she assured me she was mentally and physically able to do this, that she was going to go through with it, and she was willing to take the chance. And so she had a rough ride. There were a lot of close calls, but on July 7th, 1999, she gave birth to my beautiful daughter, Summer, who is now 22, a wonderful woman, the center of my universe, recent graduate of Marshall, go Herd, and go Promise Scholarship. And she's just everything to me. But when we talk about, when this subject would come up later about abortion, my wife would always say, you know, I'm just glad I had the choice. She said, I didn't have someone coming up to me and saying, you can't have that child, or you have to have that child. She said, I had the choice. I could have terminated the pregnancy, and no one would have said boo, because this doctor said you should do it. But she didn't want someone telling her, and we've seen that, as we know, during the COVID. People are very concerned about their choice, their freedom of choice, even when it did involve other people's lives. And my wife decided that she had that choice, and she always valued it. And even though she was a very, very religious person and very conservative, she was always expressing how glad she was that she did have that choice, and she made the choice that she felt was right, and it came out to be be very good. But again, she had the choice. And so I'm always very, very thankful about that. And unfortunately, she only lived another 11 years after that, but still I think about her all the time. And every time this comes up, I think about that my wife did have that choice and was always very supportive of that. And so I just wanted to put my 2 cents in about this subject. I know it's very tough, but because of those reasons, I'm going to be against this, and especially with the no exceptions for rape and incest. That's a whole different, another can of worms, and I'm not going to get into that right now because we've already been through it. But I just want to let you know that choice is important, and if you give people the choice, they'll usually make the choice that's right for them, and that's what I think that this is all about. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Gentlelady from the 35th, Delegate Young.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Chair of Health yield for some questions?
Chair yields.
Thank you so much. So I know you're not an OBGYN, but you're a doctor, correct?
That gentlelady is correct.
Okay. Would you agree that every one of your patients is totally different? Every medical circumstance, they're all unique in their very own way?
Oh, that I will agree with.
Awesome. And would you agree that patients should be making decisions with their doctors?
Well, that's the typical fashion of how it works.
Okay. Okay, just making sure. Okay, so specific to this bill, why 15 weeks?
That's the bill that's in front of us.
Is there something specific that happens at 15 weeks?
The bill that's in front of us is 15 weeks. The gentlelady's correct.
Okay. Okay. Would the sponsor of the bill yield, and then I think I'll come back to you, Chairman. Yes. Thank you, Delegate. Why 15 weeks?
At 15 weeks, the baby begins to feel pain. The baby has lips, eyebrows, eyelids. If there's like an intrusion, like a light appearing in there, the baby will move away from the light. So in short, the baby can feel pain. The baby can feel that it's being torn apart and aborted.
Okay. And I know that we're not talking about the point of when we think it's a baby or a fetus, or I know that's not this bill, but my friend over there alluded to life starting in the womb, and I would agree that that's typically the pro-life stance, correct?
Well, I think that's reality.
Okay. So then why not just ban it altogether? Why 15 weeks?
Well, in answering that, I can say France and Germany have decided 12 weeks was far enough. And I think of some of the historical things that have happened in Germany. Why would they select 12 weeks? Why don't we select 12 weeks? So I think it's a beginning. I think it's a good start.
Okay, thank you so much. Chair of Health, will you yield for a few more questions? Okay, so it's my understanding we currently have a 20-week ban that has an exception for medical emergencies, and that's defined, I believe, elsewhere in code.
Gentlelady is correct.
Okay. Do you know could you just give me like one example of what a medical emergency would be?
Well, I believe that's actually...
I know it's in a different part of code, and if you don't have it in front of you.
defined in a different part of code,
right.
But we will get medical emergency, has the same definition. It's already in statute. It's any condition which, in the reasonable medical judgment of a patient's physician, so complicates the medical condition of a pregnant female as to necessitate the immediate termination of her pregnancy to avert her death.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And now we're adding in severe fetal abnormality to that, which is defined as life-threatening condition incompatible with life outside the womb. Yeah?
Gentlelady's correct. It's the definition is a severe fetal abnormality means a life-threatening physical condition that, in a reasonable medical judgment, regardless of the provision of life-saving medical treatment, is incompatible with life outside the womb.
Okay, thank you. And honestly, I'm excited to hear that, because would you agree that in some senses that this bill actually expands abortion in our code?
Well, the gentlelady sees the definitions in front of her, and I believe they're medically sound. You can draw whatever statements you'd like out of that.
I agree, they are medically sound, but instead of one exception, now we've got two, so abortion is expanded in some form or fashion.
I don't believe that to be the case, but the gentlelady can draw her conclusions.
Okay, because we're cutting the weeks, but we're opening up the exceptions, which I think is actually, the opening the exceptions is a good thing. Cutting the weeks, not for me, but, okay. So, I guess why is severe fetal abnormality okay now? I'm happy about that, but why are we allowing it?
Again, the gentlelady sees the bill that's in front of us, and you'll have a chance to vote in a minute whether you agree with that or not.
Okay, I gotcha. So we've got the 20-week ban in place, and this is more of a procedural question, and the 15-week ban is going to allow for severe fetal abnormalities. Will severe fetal abnormalities be allowed from 15 weeks until 40, 42, or will 15 weeks, is it 15 to 20? Do you see what I'm saying? Right now we've got a 20-week ban, only allows for a medical emergency. 15-week ban opens it up to severe fetal abnormalities.
Counsel advises me that for fetal abnormality, it applies from 15 to 20.
So we're cool with that from 15 to 20 only. Okay, gotcha. Do you think, is this bill a copy of the Mississippi bill? Do you know?
To the gentlelady, I do not know. This is the bill that was presented to the committee for consideration.
Okay, thank you so much. Speak to the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I keep hearing that this is a hard vote, this is a hard vote. For me, this is not a hard vote at all. This is something I do not mind talking about because I have children, and I want those children to have the same rights that I have. I do know that this is the exact language of the Mississippi bill. So what are we doing? Copy, paste, legislate. We tend to do that quite a bit, and we're doing it again. In doing so, you're actually expanding abortion for severe fetal abnormalities. I like that part, but I don't like the bill in general. For me, this is I'm happy for the gentleman from the 6th who isn't here, but I'm happy he has a beautiful grandchild. I have beautiful children. This isn't about that. This is about the right to choose what's right for your body with your doctor. I don't know why we keep chipping away at abortion. If you really wanted to ban it, you would. You got the votes. But that's not what we're doing. We're just cutting it to 15 weeks. I don't know why. I'm a no. Thank you.
Gentleman 46, take a Burkhammer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I too have no issue talking about this. And I think we've all came here today and we already know how we're going to vote. And a lot of times we're told that because we are Republican men that we're not even allowed to have an opinion on this matter. And so I just want to give you a couple things to think about. And I think we've already talked about the value of life. We talked about 12, 13, 14-year-olds and the value of their life. We pass other legislation all the time because we value children's lives and we protect children from abuse and from issues. We value life for the elderly, and we write legislation and we pass it unanimously because we say we value life. But the problem then lies in is where does life begin? Does life only begin for a 12-year-old? For a 2-year-old? Does life only begin when that child takes its first breath? I would beg to differ. And I believe that we have laws that prove that very idea. Just 3 weeks ago in this country, a gentleman killed his pregnant wife. He was charged with double murder. She was 18 weeks pregnant. Double murder. Is that only because she wanted the child that it had value? But if we don't want the child, it's called choice. I believe we value we'll go as far as we value the lives of animals in this country. Do you know it's a $5,000 fine and up to 1 year in prison if you, and let me quote, take, possess, sell, purchase, transport, export, import a bald eagle egg, because we value a bird, the egg of a bird, we have to decide what is life. Some will argue that life that life ends with the absence of a heartbeat. Some would also argue and say life ends when there's no longer any brain functioning. Both of those things happen in the womb. Brain function starts in the womb. A heartbeat is to begin to start in the womb around 6 weeks. And I might agree with the gentlelady from the 35th. If it was up to me, we would ban it outright. But that's not the bill before us. We're taking steps in a positive direction. So for those that think this bill goes too far, I would argue that it doesn't go far enough. I believe life begins at conception. I urge passage.
Gentleman of 51st, Douglas Hanson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As witnessed by this debate, this is a deeply personal issue and one that's heavily influenced by people's religious beliefs. People have talked about religion on the House floor. When this issue came up several weeks ago, when the bill first started moving, one of the sponsors was quoted in the newspaper as stating that West Virginia is a Christian state in reference to this bill. And I did want to take issue with that as it relates to this bill. I think it's self-evident that it's not a Christian state. I don't think that our country is a Christian country or our state is a Christian state. There's a wide variety of religions and diversity of beliefs. But just to mention a few, since this debate started in the legislature several weeks ago, there have been religious leaders who've stepped up and spoken out in opposition to this bill. And those include, for example, Reverend Wes Bergen from Morgantown, Reverend Zach Morton and Reverend Emily Hardin from Grafton, who wrote an op-ed together where they concluded that West Virginians should have access to safe and legal and local and affordable abortions. These are religious leaders of Christian faiths. But I did want to focus a little bit more in on Rabbi Ureki's op-ed from a week or two ago, where he went into a little bit more detail about how rabbis talk about this and what Jews believe, specifically related to abortion. And he began by pointing out that there's a lot of support for the state of Israel and for the Jewish people among evangelical Christians and others, and pointing out that the state of Israel has some of the most liberal abortion laws that you would find across the country. And that most rabbis are in support of maintaining access to abortion. And in terms of specific teachings in the Jewish faith, most rabbis agree that a fetus does not have the same legal status as a person, and that it doesn't even have the status of potential life for a certain period of time, that it remains part of a pregnant woman's body as long as it's in the womb. And more specifically about when abortions would be allowed or not, the rabbis, the traditional rabbinical authorities ruled that abortions are permitted when necessary to save a woman from, quote, anguish, or when not terminating might cause suffering and emotional pain, that are both very broad terms, and that abortion is required when the life of a pregnant woman is at risk, and it's allowed at any point in the pregnancy until the head emerges. Now, I'm not bringing this up to convince anyone in this chamber that these religious teachings are correct and someone else's religious teachings are incorrect. Rather, I'm bringing them up to make sure that people recognize that there are a variety of religious teachings on this issue, and that we should not be legislating as if West Virginia is a Christian state, legislating based on the beliefs of certain religious leaders and imposing those views on people of other faiths. And if people of different faiths and people of no faith have such different views on abortion, it has to remain an issue, this decision about whether or not to have an abortion, which is one of the most intimate personal decisions that a girl or a woman or patient can make, must remain a decision between that person and her medical professional, and must be informed by that person's religious beliefs.
Chairman, the 27th, Delegate Ellington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the distinguished chair of health yield to some questions?
Gladly.
Thank you, sir. I just have some clarification. In the bill, it says gestational age is based on the first day of the last menstrual period.
Gentleman's correct.
All right, but doesn't have anything about ultrasound dating at that point or confirmation, correct?
I did not read ultrasound in that bill.
Okay. On line 8, it has licensed medical professional practicing within the scope of his or her practice. What does that include?
Well, I believe that would be any healthcare practitioner that in the scope of their practice can provide these types of services.
Examples?
Nurse midwife would probably be the one that would come to mind the clearest.
Okay. And question follow-up on that then would be, how would they perform induce the abortion? Would it be pharmacologic, medical, or surgical?
I believe all those are on, I believe the answer is all the above.
Okay, is that in the scope of practice for surgical for any of those other practitioners?
If it's in their scope of practice, it would be. If it's not, it would not be.
Okay. Let's say if there was a complication from the induced abortion, would they be able to take care of those complications? Or would that possibly be out of their scope of practice?
I'm sure if it required extensive surgical intervention, it would be out of their scope of practice, and they would probably have to seek your services.
So that would be like someone like me. They end up in the emergency room afterwards having to deal with that, correct?
That gentleman would be correct.
Okay, the reason I asked that then is, would that be followed up as a medical emergency, and then treatment would be in reasonable medical judgment? Would that fall under that?
I'm sure it would.
Okay, because let's say then, if let's say an induced abortion was at 14 weeks, the person presented after 15 weeks, and gray zone about medical emergency at that time, the physician decided to finish determination of that when it was still a viable fetus, would they be subject to the penalties?
And that would be performed to save the life of the mother?
It may not be that emergent to do that, but it would be if they made the decision that, let's say it ended up coming in at 16 weeks having some bleeding but not emergent, but they decided to finish the determination at that time.
I believe there's a clause in there about if it's in your professional judgment. So
you'd have to document that and clarify it.
Correct. That's
but it could be subject to review, however.
Well, that's the report that is sent to the health department, and there's as the gentleman can see at the bottom of page 2, it does list what's required in that report in a redacted form, so there's no patient identification data there. So
I agree. It says preserve life or physical health of maternal
Correct.
Good. Okay. That's all I really wanted to ask. Just clarification. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady in the 51st, Second Walker is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague and my friend from the 6th said, it forces us to take a stand. Each one of us is either unapologetically pro-choice or pro-life. Each truth should be respected. We have spoken about morals, religious beliefs, constituent concerns. The common denominator is choice. I want to elevate the sentiments from my colleagues of District 51. Let us be respectful to all religious beliefs and for those who may not have one. Uncomfortable for a moment to be part of a movement. I have sat in this body for years. I want to start out by saying that I shouldn't have to keep getting up to give these speeches. Every year, time and time again, this state legislature decides to spend our time and resources putting more and more restrictions on abortion care. A common, normal medical procedure that 1 in 4 who identify as a woman, and for those who don't, a patient, that will access this in their lifetime. Rather focusing on policies that will uplift our people and help them thrive from the womb to the tomb. My great-great-grandmother would always say every time someone became pregnant in our family, you have 1 foot in the grave and 1 foot out. Instead, the restrictions, the burdens, and the harm continue to fall on people with uteruses. When will the shackles and the chains be broken from my uterus and other folks who have a uterus? Let me say this loud and clear. I am a mother. I am a daughter. I am a neighbor. And to some, I am a friend. I am a woman. This is where I get uncomfortable. I am a rape survivor. I am a domestic violence survivor. I am a West Virginian by choice. And I am an abortion patient. I am an abortion patient. And that is nothing that I will ever be ashamed of. My truth, my story, my glory. House Bill 4004 would ban abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. That's the cutoff. That's not too long after most people are finding out that they are pregnant. And that's assuming that they have regular periods. Well, what if the pregnant person has other health concerns, conditions that mask pregnancy symptoms? What if they don't want to be a parent, but don't have the financial means to pay for the abortion because we have made sure that Medicaid could not cover those costs? And surely, what if a person is struggling to come up with those funds to cover out-of-pocket expenses for abortion? Then it may be fair to assume that the cost of raising an unexpected child might be a heavier burden than they can carry. And we know this legislation, this legislature, this body, isn't really talking about expanding programs that would help low-income parents. See, some want to save a fetus in the womb, but those same individuals will not invest in the environment, the economy, or education, especially sexual education, to make sure this child will thrive. What if the pregnant person is a victim of domestic violence and is trying to leave? That can take time. And 15 weeks is a cruelly short timeline for a person in that situation. But what if the pregnant person doesn't have reliable transportation, the ability to take off work without lost wages, doesn't have child care for the children that they already have, or don't have anyone to support them, go with them to appointments? Between the fact that we have one single abortion clinic left in this state and the amount of restrictions on this care that already exist, we have already made this service difficult to access. And then we wonder why it may take people longer to access care than they need. That's not a coincidence. The truth is, no person's situation is more worthy than accessing abortion than another. Everyone deserves access to a safe, affordable, accessible abortion care when they need it and on their timeline period. My point here is that this ban, like so many other cruel and unjust pieces of anti-abortion legislation this body has introduced, tries to paint abortion and the people who access it with a broad brush and make this issue black and white, when it is simply not, and it will never be. Every person's circumstance is unique, and we as legislators have no business making a medical decision for people whose lives and circumstances we know absolutely nothing about. I ain't done yet. Additionally, we're going to talk about the fact that these abortion bans are racist and sexist and are designed to target and impact BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, young people, people in rural communities, and people living with low incomes the most. Rich, well-connected folks will still be able to access abortion. They will have the ability to take off work, travel out of state, pay out of pocket, and continue their lives without a blink of an eye. These restrictions are rooted in white supremacy, particularly the exploitation of Black women, controlling women's bodies, decisions, and futures. Any attack on reproductive health and rights disproportionately burdens people of color and people with low incomes who already face discriminatory policies in order to access basic health care. I am not fooled by what the intentions of this bill brings. The people of West Virginia are not fooled. This is about control. This is about restriction. If this ban is passed, people could be forced to give birth against their will. Pregnant persons may turn to risky, illegal means to terminate a pregnancy. Those of us in this room have no room to interfere in anyone's pregnancy decision, especially when the million-dollar question is, what does this body do to meet the needs beyond birth? What do we do, y'all? If we truly believe in personal liberties and freedoms and the ability to make choices for ourselves without government interference, then let's trust the people to make their decisions that are best for their lives and their bodies. West Virginia, a place to live, work, raise a family if you choose. I encourage every one of you to think about, not yourself, think about the manipulation to agree with your stance. Think about the undue burden we are placing on the people with uteruses in this state. Think about, this is not about life but control. I will be voting firmly no, and I encourage each and every one of you to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman to 67th, Doyle is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pro-choice, but I respect the heart, the mind, and the views of anyone who calls himself or herself pro-life. I merely disagree with your view on this issue. For many years, I have hoped that our country could begin a serious dialogue to come up with a way to handle this issue that would not be regarded as perfect, but would be regarded as workable by the vast majority of the country. Hasn't happened yet. Had the amendment that was offered to this bill earlier been adopted, I might think, aha, here is a glimmer of perhaps a way to begin that dialogue. The amendment failed. And sadly, one more attempt to begin the dialogue has failed. And for that reason, in my view, the bill should fail. Thank you.
Lady in the fourth, Dr. Zukoff is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too wish the amendment would have passed. During committee, when we were discussing the medical emergency, I asked the question in both committees if someone's mental health was impacted by the pregnancy and they tried to commit suicide, would that be considered a medical emergency? And the answer was no, it would not be. I can't support a bill as a pro-life person. I can't support a bill that is going to take 5 additional weeks away from our 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old girls in West Virginia who are physically, without consent, raped or the victims of incest. And for those reasons, I'll be voting no.
Chair recognizes the gentleman to the 17th, Doug Rohrbach, to close debate on the bill. Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 81 ayes, 18 nays, and 1 member absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 4004 relating to limiting an abortion to 15 weeks gestation.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, the House stand in recess until 4 p.m.
Question before the House is the motion that, subject to announcements, the House stand in recess until 4 o'clock. Are there announcements? Are there announcements? Lady from the 38th, Doug Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republicans will caucus in this chamber immediately upon recess.
Gentleman 32nd, Doug Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Judiciary will meet tomorrow afternoon, February 16, in the House Judiciary Committee room. The agenda will be posted.
Gentleman 51st, Doug Statler.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Education will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, February 16th at 3:30 p.m. in the Education Committee room. The agenda, it will be posted.
Gentleman 35th, Doug Capito.
Yes, inquiry of the chair as to the availability of the chamber.
Thursday morning?
For Thursday morning, February 17th, from 9 o'clock a.m. to 9 o'clock a.m. to 10 a.m.
Chair is advised by the clerk that space is available.
Okay, if the Committee on the Judiciary may use the chamber, that committee will hold a public hearing for House Bill 4394 to affirm and enhance the workers' compensation exclusive remedy rule or doctrine. And that will be from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on February 17th, and this chamber registration to speak during the public hearing will open at 8:30 a.m. on Thursday morning. And you may you may come and we'll have the sign-up sheets there. Thank you.
Gentleman 15th, Doug Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Committee on Government Organization will meet tomorrow at 3 p.m. in the Government Organization Committee room, and the agenda will be posted.
Gentleman 40th, Doug Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet in the GovOrg Committee room at 2:30. Republican members will caucus in the Vice Chair's office at 2.
Gentleman 10th, Doug Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Energy and Manufacturing will meet 30 minutes after our Republican caucus ends, and Republican members will meet in the Chamber's office immediately after our caucus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman 54th, Doug Hott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Bank and Insurance will meet Wednesday, tomorrow, February 16th at 9 a.m. in the House Finance Committee room. The agenda will be posted.
Gentleman 45th, Doug Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Political Subdivisions will meet today at 6 p.m. in the House Judiciary room, or if after we get done with session after 6. So that's today. The agenda is posted. Thank you.
Gentleman 7th, Doug Barnhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Workforce Development will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, at 1 p.m. in the Government Organization Committee room. The agenda will be posted. Additionally, Republican members will caucus 15 minutes before the meeting in Chairman Zeteslo's office, room 203 in the East Wing. Thank you.
Gentleman 10th, Doug Kelly.
Speaker, I'm sorry I forgot to announce where our Energy and Manufacturing meeting would be held. It will be held in the Judiciary Committee room. Thank you.
Gentleman 48th, Doug Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services will meet tomorrow at 1 p.m. February 16th in the House Education Committee room. The agenda has been posted.
Gentleman 44th, Doug Hannah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Prevention and Treatment of Substance Abuse will meet tomorrow at 9:30 in the House Education Committee room. The agenda is posted, and I'd like to remind everyone to please bring their computers. Thank you.
Chairman, 22nd, Douglas Maynard.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet at 5 o'clock tomorrow, Wednesday, in the House Judiciary Committee room. Also, your members of T&I, the Republican members, will caucus at 4:30 in the chairman's office.
Chairman, the 25th, Douglas Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Ag and Nat Resources will meet at 8 a.m. Wednesday, February 16th in Government Organization Committee room. Please bring your computers.
Chairman, 3rd, Douglas Fluharty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats will caucus in GovOrg immediately following break, and lunch will be provided.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question is on the motion that the House stand in recess until 4 o'clock. Those in favor will please say. Lady from 51st, Douglas Walker. Additional announcements.
Not an announcement, but an introduction, sir. Can I have unanimous consent to do an introduction?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to introduce in the gallery here Josh Miller and Sherry Van Tassel, Wheeling trial lawyers visiting the Capitol to argue at the Supreme Court. Will the House please make them welcome?
Question is on the motion that the House stand in recess until 4 o'clock. Those in favor will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. We are in recess until 4 p.m.